So, when when it comes to this series, I don't know. I wasn't really that impressed. Do you guys like it ironically or unironically? Start. You can start, Heraclius.
Well, Gundam Seed is. I've made this comparison before. Gundam Seed is the Sword Art Online of Gundam.
That's not a bad
Both
analogy.
both the main characters, Kira and Kirito, they look similar. They act similar. They are both consistently rated at the top of like the new type character polls. New Type magazine being a Japanese otaku magazine, consistently rated at the top in terms of character polls and all that. And it has a somewhat similar appeal. And like SAO, you can point to a lot of bits where it's actually doing interesting stuff, or it's directed quite well, or good action here, or it's doing something interesting here. But then you can point to other bits where, oh, okay, they're trying to set something up new in this show, trying to a new plot point, trying to show how some characters have survived death-defying perils or stuff like that, and there's just no care shown. None at all. Like, there's no way that person survived that. You eliminated all possibilities for him to survive. Or this this hero who's being portrayed as a hero is not being a hero in this circumstance, but the show thinks that they are. So you have a lot of circumstances like that which just show rushness, lack of care, etc., that bring down the overall experience.
I see. How about you, Gundam? Do you like this?
Yeah. So I was talking to, like, so in DMs earlier. I did talk to Hercules about this. Is it like, while Zeta Gundam may be my favorite Gundam, Gundam Seed, similar to like G Gundam, is like one of the Gundam shows I actually probably enjoy the most. Like it's one of those, like, Seed Destiny as well. But basically, I really enjoy it. However, it is like, yeah, like the SAO comparison is actually pretty accurate. Like, Gundam Seed is like maybe I drag it down. Like the Lord and Savior. No, Kira Christ. Some of some of the animation shit, and then some of the bullshit fucking plot armor. Like, holy fuck, which we'll get into. But I think Gundam Seed at its core has a lot of like interesting ideas, and they do interesting things. However, it is dragged down quite a bit by some of the let's just say some of the plots that come up, or some of the plot points that don't get fully fleshed out or explored, or they bring it up once and then it's just like completely abandoned, even though it's apparently narratively important. So I enjoy Gundam Seed a lot, but it's definitely it's got some issues.
I mean, we can sort of start from the top and go through uh, the overall plot, because the overall plot, despite being 50 episodes, isn't the most complicated bit in the world.
Yeah, this is actually surprisingly very simple. This is very simple, like, for Gundam Fair. Like, the most you've got is maybe four political factions instead of like Gundam's, like Zeta Gundam, where it's like, 20 political factions plus sub factions, and 20 wars at once.
Well, that does make it like the original, though. That was just Federation and Xeon.
Mm,
And similar to that, Gundam Seed takes place in the year Cosmic Era 71. It takes place in a world where genetically modified people, known as coordinators, have become common, but their gifts are resented by most of the populace, and mass resentment and fear of them has forced them to take refuge among the space colonies, which are almost solely populated by them. In the year Cosmic Era 70, at the end of it, a nuclear strike is launched against one of the space colonies, killing millions. The Earth forces deny having any involvement, but understandably, the military forces of the space colony, ZAFT, do not believe this, and a war begins. And the show starts about 6 months or so after this incident, after the war started. And the main characters are all stuck on a neutral colony called Heliopolis. What's more relevant here is, unlike in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, where the colony was their homeland, in this case, the colony is belongs to a country known as Orb, which exists on Earth, and that's going to have a important role as the pretty early on here, because as you do in Gundam, turns out the neutral colony is developing weapons for the Earth forces. They're not supposed to be doing that, and inevitably Zaft forces invade. A lot of people die, as you do in Gundam. In order to explain how the main character and his motley crew get pulled into all this, he just sort of happens to run into these mobile suits as they're trying to push them into the main ship, the Archangel, and the ship captain decides that, well, all you kids, since you have seen top secret Earth Forces technology, I am going to hold you hostage and not let you leave. In fact, I am going to basically impress you into becoming soldiers for this understaffed Archangel ship.
Yeah, they've basically been drafted in the war.
Yeah, and again, what's interesting about this is the show doesn't ever seem to consider the fact that they are essentially kidnapping neutral citizens. Uh, it would be one thing if they acknowledge this, but it does not, and it portrays this as simply a necessary measure in order to protect secret tech. And this will also come up later when all the characters eventually do make it back to Orb, and Orb makes no demand at all that all of these characters be let free and that they not continue impressing them as soldiers for a completely foreign nation.
Yeah, like to use an analogy, right? It would be like me, a guy from New Zealand, being like drafted into the Azov battalion or something like that. Like just like, oh, you saw our top secret tank. Welcome to the war. Like just get dragged in.
More or less, yes. And But of course, it's Gundam. Ultimately, you have to have an excuse as to why the teenage pilots get dragged into the war. And in this case, you have the young Kira Yamato, who is instantly able to improve the OS of this antiquated Gundam, which can barely run properly at this point. At which point, the Earth forces quickly learn this guy has to be a coordinator. And this instantly puts him at odds with both his his friends, who are now serving alongside him, and the entire crew of the Archangel and the Earth forces Kira is now reluctantly fighting for. Coordinators are despised amongst by so-called naturals for either for being abominations against humanity or simply because, like the mutants in X-Men, they fear that the superior race might come along and totally conquer the inferior one.
So about the meta, I guess. So what I know, what little I know is that Gundam Seed succeeded in, uh, I guess, bringing Gundam to new audiences. I believe this came out.
Oh, incredibly so.
Yeah.
Uh,
It,
to give a sorry, go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead.
I mean, to give you an idea, in China, they decided to build up recently a life-size Gundam. Did they build like a life-size version of the original Gundam? No. They built a life-sized version of the Freedom Gundam directly out of
Really?
this show. Yes, that
Nice.
that is how popular Gundam Seed is. 20 years on. It's incredibly defining for the whole franchise. And if I had to guess, I'd say that the reason it got popular over there is because Gundam Seed puts a very great emphasis on the idea of the cycle of violence and the cycle of vengeance, particularly with regards to warfare, and how this cycle of vengeance will quite quickly get out of hand, and how it can be almost impossible to unwind once it gets going.
So this came.
And you know, and if you read, like, say, for example, like some Chinese literature, like the Three Kingdoms, or something like Legend of the Three Kingdoms, or some shit like that, that actually kind of makes a lot of sense because you read that, yeah, like shit spirals way out of fucking control in that story.
So this came out after 9/11, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe no, it would have come out. Uh, let's see. I think it started coming out just before. Oh no, you're right. It came out October 5th, 2002. If we're going to make 9/11 comparisons, this show is not influenced by 9/11 at all. You can, I mean, maybe you can say because the incident that started the war was terrorism, you can say that, but really there is aside from the fact that at the midway point they meet some mid South North African forces who look a lot like Middle Easterners who fight alongside the main characters. Outside of that, there was basically no 9/11 influence on the show. You won't see 9/11 influence until Gundam 00, which is heavily, heavily influenced by the wars in the Middle East and is very much
Oh
about
fuck yeah!
terrorism
Which we'll have
and
to get to
all
that
that
at some
kind of
point.
stuff.
As for the Gundam meta, I guess the other thing would be.
Yeah, this is by the way for the Gundam Minute. This is one of I think this is the first or the earliest that they used actual digital animation for the franchise.
Yes, yes, and you can see some of the issues sometimes with that, where animation's a little hairy at times. In terms of like some of the character designs, well, they'll occasionally look a little flat. You also have the issue of it was animated in 480p. So anyone who wants to watch Gundam Seed has a interesting dilemma. They can watch the original 480p version, or they can watch the HD remaster, which was an extensive like retrace of the scenes, which still has like a number of scenes that are only just upscaled and are obviously not retraced and stick out like a sore thumb. and on top of that, also has a few changed around scenes in terms of like the animation and the style and what actually is shown to happen in those scenes. So no matter what, you're kind of in a dilemma if you're watching Gundam Seed about which version you want to watch.
How do the movies look like? Do they look any better, or is it the same?
Uh, the movie, the movies, to my knowledge, I've actually never watched them. I imagine they would have had to have been upscaled from the start because you obviously you can't throw 480p onto a movie screen, and they did air those things in movie theaters. So I'm guessing that the special edition compilation films were in HD to begin with, but I really don't know.
As for the director, have you watched anything else by the people behind this show?
For Mitsuo Fukuda, he's done a couple shows before this called Future GPX Cyber Formula
Oh,
and Gear
I
Fighter
haven't watched that show, but like it's on my watch list.
and Gear Fighter Dendo. I've not watched any of those. I have watched Cross Angie, which is this really out there, edgy Yuri bait uh, mecha show, um, which also carries on some of the themes for the sequel to the show, Gundam Seed Destiny, and will expand on that and its themes.
I
Uh,
yeah, sorry. I have
yeah,
watched Gear Fighter Dendo. It's sort of it's a mecha, uh, I, which but it's slightly it's about aliens attacking the Earth, and it's not exactly a super robot show, but it's a little bit for a slightly younger audience. I would say it's nice though for what it is.
yeah, that's interesting. One of the interesting bits of the lore with Gundam Seed, and actually, the one of the weird things about it is a lot of the lore was like created before or without Fukuda, and then he came on and he directed it and pushed the story where it did. There's some bits in the lore about uh, apparently aliens are believed to have at some point visited their world because they have this big fossil, which is like a whale with
Oh
wings.
yeah, the whale stone.
Yeah, and this is one of those bits where it's like it never becomes like important or anything, but it's just sort of brought up and it's sort of interesting in the middle of the show.
Yeah,
It doesn't become important in the sequel or anything like that, and it does
Like
sort of.
what it is like it's a cool like lore thing. Like look at this cool like fossil we found. It's very interesting. Like you know, like it kind of gives you an idea. Like it's like oh, there's a bigger, wider world out there, and we're just getting a little taste of it. You know.
and I believe that one of the writers for the series was also the wife of the director. Yeah.
Yes, Chiaki Morisawa. That was apparently their standard thing of doing. They did it on Gear Fighter Dendo as well, where she would write and he would direct. Ultimately, and she sort of became defined by this project. Uh, and the she in particular would get a little bit of backlash for both this, but especially for Gundam Seed Destiny, because she ended up having to go through cancer treatment during the middle of Gundam Seed Destiny
Oh,
while being the head writer, and that obviously slowed things down and led to the staff getting behind uh, in terms of like keeping up, and you can also see that very much was the case in Gundam Seed as well. You have about 4 recap episodes during this whole show, but not just that. During the middle of it, you actually have 2 recap episodes in a row. So, and for those who don't know, recap episodes only ever exist if you can't get something out on the screen in time. That's the reason for the existence of recap episodes. No one goes out from the start and says, "Oh yes, we think now is the right time to recap things." It happens because of necessity.
Mm.
So yeah,
Would you
uh,
say? Sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
Would you say that Gundam Seed has sort of been affected by Eva, maybe, or you don't see that?
No.
No.
Uh, I'd say light influence in terms of the main character, because the main character, Kira Yamato, um, he's somewhat similar to Shinji in that he is the quiet, lonely type. Um, just sort of good at school stuff. We don't actually get to see much of their lives the before they get dragged into the war. I mean, they show us them, but they don't show us anything about the characters, and it's kind of a bit of the issue there. But as the main character gets pulled in, he also has to contend with the fact that his best friend from childhood, Afrin Zala, happens to be on the other side, and one of the main top secret special forces dudes that just stole the Earth Forces' Gundams away. And so from the start, Kira is put against facing his best friend in Mortal
Yeah,
Kombat.
and just for added
Former best
context,
friend.
like, and just for context, like in the narrative, right, is that like they've only been separated by like a couple of years, like like,
I
but
didn't
they were.
get that impression at all because
No, I
they
think they said that like it's been like I think they said it's like been a year or two since they last talked to one another
no,
because
no. Because they keep flashing back to this one scene of them saying goodbye to each other, and they both look like they're about 10. So I don't think it's been. I think it's actually been a long time. That's always what I think.
okay. But basically, like right off the bat, right? He's like, this is someone he gets. This is like a good friend of his, right? And then it's like opposite sides, and I would say that that kind of part there's like probably one of the more stronger parts about the show. And you definitely feel bad for fucking Afrin as well, having to fight his own fucking friend.
Oh yeah, and Atherin will oftentimes chastise Kira in the middle of combat. What on earth are you fighting for these people for? And for Kira, it's just, hey, my friends are on the ship because they got forcibly impressed. I gotta protect it. Rather simple and pragmatic response. But Atherin is just tearing his hair out because, like, hey, the Earth forces hate you for what you are, a coordinator. Why are you fighting for these people?
And here's the thing, right? I mean, here's the thing. Efren's father is on the fucking like Zaft council, right? Like, you don't think that they couldn't arrange some sort of like deal with Kira? Like, you don't think Efren couldn't middleman some deal with Kira of like, look, we'll take your friends and the mobile suit, and we'll drop you off at Orb or something like that, right? And you can go off your way. You don't think
Probably, but it would involve killing the Archangel Captain and all the other crew.
I mean, yeah, true, but like, like you don't think like that Efren couldn't arrange some sort of deal, right? Like his dad is on the council and shit like that. Like he could like arrange some sort of deal. Like,
Oh,
I'm not saying
yeah,
that
sure.
Kira would take it, but like there is that option.
I mean, I much preferred it how it was in the original Gundam, where like Amuro was fighting for his own survival, whereas here it's more like Kira is fighting for the because he cares about his friends or whatever. It doesn't feel like
Uh,
he himself is in that much danger.
well, I mean, he is, but yeah, I get what you mean. And I'd say also one of the weaknesses there is although his friends are his main
Motivation.
driver of motivation, his friends almost are not that well characterized. I can name them off because I just
Sai, Toph.
but Toll, Koenig, Kuzi. Now I can name them off because I just recently saw the show. But here's the thing. I can't tell you much about these characters at all. Toll, I can't tell you anything about that character. Sai, I kind of
A little
tries to
bit.
be supportive. He's involved. Yeah, he's the fiance of Flay. Kuzi, I can't tell you anything about this character. Moralia, up until episode 30 or so, I can't tell you anything about this character. And so this is definitely one of the show will end up placing more emphasis on the day-to-day plot. And sometimes this actually works out. You have one of the better early plots is where they come into this little uh, base being held by the Earth forces, and this is actually a direct callback to a similar story beat in the original Gundam, but they do it slightly differently here. In this version of events in Gundam Seed, the Earth forces are made up of three mega blocks, and this Eurasian block, which owns this great base, is suspicious of the Atlantic Federation people that the Archangel is affiliated with, and basically decide to start detaining the captain and everything, and interrogating people, and basically tell them, oh no, our deflector shields are impenetrable. No one can possibly get through. And
And then Teenage Boy did.
yeah, and then the stealth suit lets them penetrate the shields.
Whoops.
Whoops. Yeah, and only because the Archangel crew decide to I guess you could say mutiny, but not really. Decide to go their own way from the start. Are they able to escape in time before the whole area blows up?
Didn't something like that happen in the original Gundam too? Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, there was a plot point where there was this one commander who was demanding to know all their transfer records and stuff, and basically thought Bright wasn't qualified to be captain because he was just a trainee. And it's one of those shows, those episodes where this guy is basically out of his depth. And as soon as Shaw starts making this raid on their base, and the white base crew fights it off, he has to reluctantly acknowledge that he was totally wrong about Bright, and he sends them on their way.
Yeah.
And this, however, the base blows up, and they're like, "Fuck."
I mean, so this is supposed to be an introduction, sort of an reintroduction to Gundam. So I guess um, it makes sense that it would have some of the same story beats as the
Yeah,
original series.
especially once we get to like Gundam Seed Destiny, you can totally see the Zeta plot beats. Like, holy shit!
I,
Like,
I I I don't know much about that, but
Like, there's
That's
definitely a few
totally.
like Zeta Gundam plot beats, with fucking Shin and Stella and the Destroy Gundam.
Oh yeah, certainly. But anywho, uh, as the story progresses, the main character. One of the other plot beats is they briefly find this character named Lacus Klein amongst the wreckage, and there's a whole hostage trade-off bit where the Earth Force, the Archangel, doesn't initially want to use her as a hostage, uh, but they feel forced to after they're put in a hopeless situation where the ship's about to be destroyed, and Lacus would die along with them.
Yeah, so just for context, Lacus is the daughter of another like a famous like basically she's a daughter of someone on the Zaft council, but she's also like a fucking idol. So she's a very valuable hostage.
Yes, and she'll become quite a central character as things go on. She's sort of portrayed as being bubbly and all that, but and a little sweet and naive. But you get little hints that she might have more of a different side to her. Now, one of the interesting bits about the characterization of Kira, and it's something they show somewhat subtly over time, is as his the truth of him being a coordinator comes out, and as he's forced into exhausting battle after exhausting battle, he becomes almost completely isolated from his friends, really.
Yes. And
Um,
here's the thing, you see this, like he's even living in the Strike Gundam, like similar to like Amuro Ray in the show is like his entire life is starting to revolve around like fucking battle and surviving and protecting people and all this shit. But continue what you have to say.
yeah, and it's actually very interesting and, in my opinion, realistic the way they show where he just is going through complete burnout. Where and again a similar plot point to what they did with Amuro, but it's slightly different where Kira just keeps silently accepting it, but he's also devoted himself entirely to it, and almost doesn't think of anything else. And all of the other characters, his friends, really don't know what to do for him. They feel, I don't know, I guess you could say a little awkward trying to cheer him on, and there's also the revelation that he is a coordinator, which none of them apparently knew. And he's also torn up about the fact of like taking his first few lives, which really screw him up in the head a little, and he has a hard time dealing with
Yeah,
that.
like especially because like Kira is a very gentle person, and also these are people. This is like shooting at his own kind or countrymen, basically. Like it's pretty traumatizing, and even to make it worse off, like these are people who are friends with fucking Afrin or Afrin knows. Like that's what makes it really fucked. Like that's what really fucks him, right? Is that like he has to do all these awful things, and like it gets even more fucked when it comes to like the Desert Tiger who actually likes like
Yes.
Andrew Wolford. Like that dude's a fucking Chad.
Yeah. So in the middle of all this, uh, steps in Flay Ulster. Flay
Best
is
female character.
Flay is a very controversial character in Gundam Seed. She was so controversial, if you believe some people, and I think this is probably somewhat true, her role was reduced in the show at about the halfway point from what it was originally going to. Flay is daughter of some big minister in the Earth forces, but nevertheless, she got sent off to Aura, perhaps to protect her from the war, and she ends up watching her father get killed uh, in battle. And Kira had promised her that he'd protect her father's ship, and ultimately he failed. No particular fault of his own, but Flay
I mean,
blames
he's
him.
fighting against 4 mobile suit pilots that are just as good as him, and like he's only one go. He's only one dude. Like he's not a miracle worker.
Yes, Flay blames him for this. And on top of that, she already has a seething hatred of coordinators.
She's
She,
coping and seething in the corner.
yeah, yeah. She never particularly liked them, never particularly trust them, and her father dying didn't exactly make things better. Um, but an idea, just as the Archangel crew are finally able to get away and are able to make it down to Earth, she has an idea. Kira is all alone, has no one else fighting for to fight for or anything like that. What if I make myself the thing that he fights for? What if I seduce this kid? Get him to fight for me and get him so frenzied in a state of panic that maybe he'll fight for me as recompense for my father dying, and maybe he'll even die in combat in order as justice for him failing to save my father. Yes, if I can seduce him and get him to do that, that will be almost a double victory. And it's kind of crazy, but
Yeah,
and this
we're
is
hitting like Gundam Wing, that bitch you wanted to have a glorious war levels of crazy here. Like,
yeah
strap in, folks.
yeah, we're reaching levels of like female sexual evil, which generally are not delved into, and I think because of that, it was somewhat shocking. What was also incidentally somewhat shocking at the
Interesting.
time, is they do show like pretty clearly that Kira and Flay are having sex, and this was unusual at the time and actually provoked a minor controversy back in 2002 because Gundam Seed, I believe, aired at a prime time slot, or at least at a slot where it wasn't unusual for kids as well as teens or adults to be watching. So it was considered somewhat uh,
Risque.
risque for the time, and there was a slight controversy over it. Regardless, uh, as the story continues, Kira really gives his all into Flay and is becomes completely devoted. You could say almost obsessive towards her, and has a standoff with Flay's old fiance over her. Where he's based. Oh,
Yeah, but basically,
and
Kira cuckolded one of his friends, and he broke the bro code.
yeah, you could say that. Like Sai, technically, it was an arranged marriage between uh, parents, and there wasn't like anything. It's not like these two were lovers by that point or anything, but they sort of liked one another. Certainly, Sai had feelings for Flay, and it's not like Flay never reciprocated. Um, and but and certainly Kira could see that and would understand going in that he's sort of taking away Sai's potential lover, but from his perspective, and he justifies this to Sai as such, Flay was gentle to me. Flay showed care to me in the middle of like his darkest moments where he was all alone, basically
And vulnerable.
exhausted, crying himself to sleep. And he considers that so valuable that he doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear about anyone else, about their reasoning or them getting in their way. He doesn't care. All that matters is that Flay was gentle to him, and that's all that matters. But again, you have, like, for whatever you want to say about some of the bits later on where the plot logic just really falls apart, there's some really strong characterization in this show, and it's doing some really unique character beats that were new to Gundam at that point, and are just unusual, but really quite interesting.
Yeah, like it's just kind of because Kira is kind of portrayed a little bit like he has this reputation of being like a Mary Sue and all this shit, but like literally the Flay Ulster shit, right, is like the moment of weakness because the context is that that because there was a civilian shuttle that he was protecting and it got shot down, and that girl gave him a paper flower thanking him for like protecting them and shit. And then when he sees that like person die, it fucks up even worse because this is just another person that I've just failed in protecting. You know,
Yeah, I believe that's technically the moment when him and Flay first start having sex. Is
it's
she
like
bring?
basically it's after that it's after that moment and when they land on Earth and he's like from his fucking fever because you remember they're like in mid orbit, they're getting into like they're entering like orbit, right, like the guy from the door, I think it's Ezek, shoots down the civilian transport. He freaks out, tries to shoot him, he lands, he's in a coma, like he's got a bit of a fever, right, and then he like wakes up later and he's really fucked over it, and that's when that shit starts kicking off.
Mhm.
Because Flay's like, oh, he's vulnerable and emotionally like at his lowest point. Well, that's a good time to slip right in.
Yep, exactly. It's at this point that you get into the desert arc of the show. We're talking about episodes 15 or so, and they're going. This is one of the bits that did this bother you as well, Bio Gundam? They all the maps they show that they're like in somewhere like central to southern Africa, yet
Yes.
everyone around and the surroundings are like clearly Middle Eastern.
Yeah, it did.
It's like, you're being a little your geography. Uh, anyways, the this is another area of the war on Earth. The only reason they ended up here is because the whole ship ended up diverting in order to
Save
save
Kira.
Kira's strike Gundam as it was about to get destroyed in the atmosphere. Uh,
Oh, but,
which is
by the way, we should mention that Kira managed to survive impact with only like say a minor fever.
Yeah, they do make a mention of that, and it's a minor plot bit there. That basically it was so hot inside the Gundam at that point that any normal human would have been long dead. Like, coordinators are exceptionally resilient creatures. They are exceptionally smarter, faster,
Yeah, like the
more
doctor
capable.
basically like the doctor pretty much said like yeah they're not immortal but like stuff that would cripple or like badly like say for example like a really bad stomach virus or something like that to a natural, yeah, that can fuck them up, but for a coordinator it's just a mild inconvenience. Like
Yeah.
that's one of the interesting things about like the coordinator stuff. Like it's not that just they're genetically altered, it's just like they are actually stronger and better than you. Like their capacity is much higher than like the average normal fucking Joe. Like the average coordinator is 10 times better than the average normal dude.
Yeah, and I believe, in as far as this warfare goes, they are outnumbered at least 10 to 1. The coordinators in this war.
The only downside that they seem to have is that they can't reproduce enough. Like,
Yes, yeah. That's the only major downside they mention is that past the third generation, the ability of coordinators to continue reproducing with one another ceases, and they need a natural parent in order to continue the life cycle, which I can imagine is something of an issue, especially if you've basically segregated yourself into your own little ethno state to protect against the naturals that mostly hate you.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess you just need a slave population of naturals. Just
Yeah, pretty much.
um,
I mean, like we're joking about that, right? But like the funny thing is, I was talking to Heracles about that. Like, literally, Zaft is like portrayed as like probably one of the most heroic fucking factions in the setting.
oh, they are like, and that's one of the bits that we'll come to as we go further. Is like, and you sort of get this feeling really from the start. Is Zaft isn't doing much wrong. Like at the start of the show, just simply because of the main character got stuck on the Earth Force's side, obviously you're going to side with them for now, and you're trying to theoretically hope that they survive. But it never really portrays Zaft as being especially villainous in
I mean,
any
and especially
capacity.
when you get into the like, yeah, I mean, especially when you get into the desert arc, we really start seeing this. Like with I think it's Andrew Wolfold. Like that dude's fucking Chad as fuck. Like holy shit.
Yeah, Andrew Waldfeld, as they move into the Middle Eastern desert, they bump into some desert guerrillas who are fighting off the local Zaft forces. Uh, Basically, they're people that don't like any major power block squatting on their land, so they fought the Earth
Fair
forces
enough.
in the past, but now they're fighting Zaft. Um, and Zaft is in this area is being led by Andrew Waldfeld, and he he's he's being called the Desert Tiger, so very obvious reference to Erwin Rommel there. Also, a very obvious callback to Rambaral in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, but they do, I'd say, more in-depth stuff here than with Rambaral. Uh, he's shown to be a very
Affable man, carefree,
amiable
chill, a bro.
amiable man. As a commander and as a military operations guy, he very much tries to use, as Mulaflaga puts it, one of the main, sort of the main pilot and mentor to Kira on the Earth Forces ship, the Archangel. As Mulaflaga puts it, he really tries to treat the guerrillas with kid gloves. Like, for example, when he decides to attack their village, he notifies all of them that they're going to burn all their uh, supplies, and he orders, and his soldiers order all of the people to evacuate now if they don't want to die, which they do so,
Yeah, like
and they burn their
basically, he's like,
supplies.
yeah, we're gonna bomb this place like in 15 minutes, so get the fuck out of here now.
Yeah, and what Andrew Waldfeld is trying to do is he's trying to bring everyone into the city where they will presumably act peacefully, stop running raids on convoys and shit like that, and just generally be amiable. And he governs with a very light hand. He's by no means a particularly totalitarian ruler or
You know, like
anything
for a
like
military
that.
commander, like yeah, like he is pretty like he could be doing a lot worse. Like he could just be like brutal fucking sand warlord dude. But nah, he's just like yeah, we're fighting a war, but I'm being quite gentle about it. Like he's not as brutal as he could be,
And
which I think is interesting.
he himself even acknowledges that in a lot of ways he should be more brutal. There's this scene where, and I made this comparison, in classic Star Trek esque logic, they decide to send the main character, uh, who has like the best piloting skills, who they can't afford to lose. They decide to send him into the city on a spy mission.
What's the worst that can happen?
You know, it's plot. You gotta have the main character involved doing stuff. You accept it.
I mean, look, they
And
have the nice debate about kebabs, so you know.
And him and this desert tomboy girl Kagali, who has been fighting alongside the desert gorillas, who he's met and sort of sparred off a little bit with. Kagali is a little bit more of an idealist. She believes, she hates the desert tiger. She wants to fight to the bitter end. Uh, she's also blonde haired and golden eyed and doesn't look like anyone else there, so she's clearly not a native. I wonder where she might be. Anywho,
Yeah, and
Kira.
this brown haired kid with him, this Kira Yamato, that doesn't sound like a Middle Eastern name.
Hmm. No.
Suspect.
Anywho, they they end up getting found and indirectly saving Andrew Waldfeld, the enemy commander, from a bunch of terrorists. And Andrew Waldfeld
For
decides
our
to put them.
blue and pure world.
Yes, Blue Cosmos. They are the main uh, big terror hate group that hates all coordinators. They never go into particular detail about their beliefs. The most we get is is a small blurb about how they started out as an environmentalist group, and it turned into the idea that coordinators are abominations against nature. Again, it's not really the strongest motivation, because as we've gone over, aside from the fact that they can't reproduce past third generation, coordinators literally seem to have no downside to them. They don't seem to have any like horrible genetic diseases or anything that bad that will happen to them as a result of all this genetic modification. So it really comes across like an irrational belief outside of left field. But regardless, you have Andrew Waldfeld invites Kira and this Kagali into his place. He,
Yeah,
of
because
course,
they got like fucking yogurt sauce and like chili sauce on like their clothes and stuff. And like, here's the thing: like he shows up to save Kira from eating kebabs wrong. He's like, "Oh fuck no, I need to stop this now."
there's this scene where him and Kagali are sitting down to eat kebabs. Kira doesn't know what the hell a kebab is, and he is it even really a kebab? I think they were technically eating gyros, whatever.
Yeah, it's not.
uh,
It doesn't look like a doner kebab because like
no,
we have.
yeah, it looks like a gyro. They were eating gyros. The entire thing's like whatever. Anyways, uh, Waldfeld shows up. Kagali is telling him how he should put this sauce on, and in disguise, Waldfeld with sunglasses shows up and starts saying, "Oh, that's terrible! How could you put the chili sauce on and not the yogurt sauce on?" And you'll immediately get a sense where he's just inserting himself into this random conversation where he's not necessarily wanted, but he's being like super amiable and open about it, and Kagali's
Like,
getting
dude,
annoyed.
the desert tiger must have like charisma 18 or 20 to do that shit. Like, he just inserts himself into your life. It's like, oh, I never want him to leave.
Yeah, and so as thanks for them saving his life, he brings them into his area, into his little ruling palace, and he talks with them a little. And of course, Kagali, being the honest young tomboy that she is, almost immediately ends up giving up the ghost that they're on the other side. Something he probably heavily suspected, anyways. And he decides to put a little more quandary to him and to Kira and Kagali, and he points a gun at them and he says, like, when does this war end? When does the fighting end? When every last enemy is eliminated, is it? And he's sort of begging the question, and this is going to become a major theme of Gundam Seed, of how do you determine like the end point of war? Does it end up in like the destruction of Carthage or Amalek, where the only method of resolving things is the complete eradication of the enemy?
And
And
it's an interesting thing you bring this up because we will bring this up later on. But like the conflict between like the Earth Federation and Zaft, it's definitely getting into like the total war territory, especially like at the halfway point.
yeah, and there's people that sort of on both sides that start to push things towards that direction. Now, Andrew himself acknowledges that that might be the right thing to do to escalate towards that, and that perhaps the right thing to do for him would be to shoot Kira here and there. He's like a major danger to his side. But ultimately, he can't stomach that. That's not who he is. And so he just decides to let them go, and he hopes to meet them on the battlefield again.
Yeah, and
They
what's interesting about like Andrew, right, is that like even in the battlefield, he's complimenting Kira, like he's talking to his wife or girlfriend. He says like, "Oh, like look, you saw seen that kid the other day, like fucking unbelievable." Like like like
oh
he's not
yeah,
a bad dude.
he goes into combat with his wife in tow. They're both piloting the same dog mobile suit. Uh, and there's like one line where he goes, uh, do you think he's going to surrender, Aisha?" "No, Andy. He's a soul like you." It's like, "Yep." Uh, they end up having a big battle and duel. Uh, Again, he re-emphasizes to Kira, where Kira tries to get him to surrender after his ship has been destroyed, and he says, "This is war, Kira. You keep fighting until the last person dies." And he ends up getting killed and blown up, which is another one of the long list of deaths, which screws Kira up a little bit.
Yeah, because here's the thing: this is a guy that he actually likes. So this is a dude. This like he's not a bad
Well,
dude.
it's,
Well,
well,
Andrew
it's
and his like
also
fucking
it's also personal for Kira because this is like the first anime he's like really gotten to know quite well,
yes.
and he's then had to kill. He's had to shoot it after him, but he hasn't had to kill him yet.
Yet, emphasis on the yet part. But yeah, like basically, like the desert arc just further screws us from. This is also where we get more into like the seed mode or something like that.
Yeah, there's this bit, and these are honestly some of the best action bits in the show. There's no real. You'll find explanations in side materials, but there's no real explanation inside the show of what exactly this seed factor is. But it'll show the main character's eyes like almost dilating, and this big seed pew going off over their head, and immediately it's like they become hyper focused. Kira in particular becomes hyper focused,
No, no. What has
and
happened, right? Is he's tapped into the autism force, right? Like he's tapped into the tism, the
no,
wellspring of strength.
no, no.
I'm joking.
Anyways, he becomes hyper focused, and he's able to like instantaneously process everything that's going on in combat and just deal with it and massacre enemy after enemy after enemy. Uh, Dodge this blow, strike. Dodge this blow, strike. And
Yeah, and like and fucking Desert Tiger Kun sees this shit and he's like, wow, like you should have seen this shit, like fucking unbelievable. Like he's like, fuck yeah.
yeah, he's like, this is a true soldier here. And he's sometimes compared to a berserker in that capacity. It's not a terrible comparison.
Nah, yeah,
Uh,
no, it's pretty fucking accurate. Like he's just chainsawing through Zaft soldier after Zaft soldier. Like he's like the Doom guy, right? Like it's just like the Zaft soldiers are his health packs. Like down now 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 now.
Yeah, just tears through them. There's then a couple like spare episodes where they have them going through the ocean. Not too much happens in these episodes. They just sort of fight more Monster of the Week dudes. Uh, they sort of start setting things up where, as they start approaching Orb, which is like the home place for all the impressed crew, they manage uh, Atherin and his special team, which were previously fighting Kira in space, come down to Earth. They are tasked with blowing up the Archangel. Kira is able to mostly fight them off. They end up getting into Orb real quick. You get
Because apparently they have like the princess of Orb with them.
yes, Kagari turns out to be the daughter of the head of state of Orb, which is one of those. Yeah, I although she had a bodyguard, I really can't believe that he okayed this of like letting his naive daughter see the world in like the most dangerous way possible. There's about
Yeah,
5 different times she could have easily died.
yeah. It's like, yeah, go to the Libyan civil war. That's perfectly fine. Oh, you want to go to Afghanistan? Sure. Okay, here's a bodyguard. You'll be fine. What's this? You want to go to Cambodia during the civil war? Sure, do that.
Yeah,
Perfectly fine.
it's kind of nutty, but you know
No, but it's just
it's
like, oh yeah, I'll send my daughter to a war zone. Here's a bodyguard. Have fun. Be safe.
it's anime. You accept that to a certain extent.
She'll be
About
fine.
Kagali, I guess we could also mention that they do show her at the start a little bit, and then she
Yeah,
disappears
they
for a long while.
they briefly show her at the start, and that's almost like, I guess you could say, teasing for her true identity, is because she like shows up. She sees like a mobile suit, the 5 mobile suits being developed in the first episode, and goes, "I can't believe this, Father. You've betrayed us." And you say like, "Oh well, who, Father?" "Oh well, if she's the daughter of Orb, of the Orb head of state, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense." And that's supposed to be the tip off as to her identity. Other than that, and showing that Kira is like selfless and will have someone else take the lifeboat before him. That scene and her existence in the first episode really serves no purpose. Like,
Yeah,
it's just sort of odd and there. But
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, speaking of, we'll wait. Does this happen before? Is this before? No, this is after yeah, this is after Orb. So never mind. We'll go to that moment in a bit.
yeah, and him and it's also worth noting at this point that Kagali, uh, well, perhaps maybe having some feelings for Kira. They're blushing a lot at one another. They're a little bit more or less. She's started to reach out and actually be a familiar role and someone that he can
Rely
uh,
on, like
rely on.
emotionally rely on.
Yeah, and this provokes a little bit of jealousy from Play. Nothing too terrible, but she's definitely a little jealous. But it also provides Kira a little emotional reprieve. And Flay, it should also be noted, is becoming increasingly attached to Kira, and doesn't seem to be going cackling in her bed anymore about "Yes, die for me, you bastard."
Yeah, like as the show goes on, and we'll talk about this later on when it comes to like Flay and her fate and shit like that. But literally, like as the story goes on, I generally believe that like originally, right, like she was coping and seething, but I think it originally became like genuine feelings.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's like
they say that like directly as such, like in a direct like confrontation between her and Sai later. Like there is nothing subtle about this. There is a scene devoted to them explaining that to the
Yeah,
audience.
yeah, but like she comes less coping and saving, and she actually genuinely cares. And here's the thing: I don't think she doesn't want to admit it herself.
In a way, but like at the same time, she acts genuinely loving to Kira, and she genuinely looks out for them, albeit in her very own like naturally manipulative way. Like she doesn't want to let any other girl get too close to Kira.
Yeah, but that's
Uh,
most women in general.
yes, so it's like
Even
hard to
even
it's
after
hard.
even after Flay joins the military, I don't think she's given any duties. Um,
No, no, and you can tell
Her
she's
duty is
like
to make sure that Kira doesn't have a mental fucking background. That's her job. Right. You're gonna be our strongest emotional support soldier. Now get in there.
so yeah,
yeah, you can
We need
yeah
our
you can
strongest child soldier to fight well.
so
yeah you
basically
can
her
tell
duty is
she's
to have sex with Akira, basically.
no, not literally.
Not literally, but that'd be funny.
Uh, but you can tell she's emotionally not as strong as any of those other characters because all the rest of them are serving in some sort of military capacity, whereas she basically just seems to be helping out with personnel or something like that.
She's the cheer squad.
Yeah. Anywho, she ends up getting pulled along. They go to Orb, and this is actually the moment. And this is one of those things where I think this was somewhat influenced by the fact that Flay was disliked. Flay is one of those characters. You go on any internet forum, type in Flay Ulster, and there's going to be all sorts of stuff about how crazy she is, what a crazy bitch, how evil she is. Ah! In hindsight, I can't even consider her to be that crazy. But that was
Look,
very
she's
much the
got
feeling.
crazy. Look, she's got crazy bitch vibes, but she isn't like crazy crazy.
Yeah. But that was the vibe at the time, and that was the way people felt towards her. So there's this scene where uh, they've finally arrived at Orc. Most everyone is fighting it out. Is going to is visiting their parents back in Orb, who are like happy to see them. For some reason, Orb doesn't insist, okay, you're all back at Orb, you Archangel, you have to, like, de-impress our soldiers right now. For some reason, they do not make that demand, which I find, like, wild. But, whatever. Um, Kira wants to spend all his time working on the new operating system for mobile suits for Orb, and he decides ultimately that uh, there's this scene where Flay, she has no one left. Her mother died when she was young. Her father died in that battle earlier, and she's also kind of on the outs with everyone else
Yeah,
because
because of
like
the cuck holding.
yeah, she kind of like stole. She kind of left Psy out to dry, even if it's not like they were uh,
Close.
tremendously close, but they were close.
It's still a
Um,
bitch move.
it's still a bitch move, yeah. And so because of that, there's this real distance between her and the
Like
rest of
that's the
Kira's
interesting thing
friends.
about it, right? Is that you sense like yeah, like they like there is a bit of tension in the air on the Archangel. Like you definitely sense there's that tension.
Hmm. Yeah, and so because of that, really all she has left is Kira at this point, and she asks Kira like, "Hey, what are you? Why are you staying back and not seeing your parents? Shouldn't you go see them?" And of course, being somewhat narcissistic, she views it in terms of herself, and she goes like, "Hey, why aren't you visiting them? Is it pitying to me? Are you pitying me because I don't have anyone to go back to at all. It's sort of like a little angry lash outfit. And Kira at this point decides to break up with her, saying this was a mistake from the beginning. And she goes, "What do you mean by that?" And she angrily storms out crying. Um, and Kira, you can somewhat understand it because on the one hand, like, he's emotionally exhausted, and the main thing he's looking for at all times is to not be emotionally exhausted. So I guess you
Like
can
he's just
see.
tired at this point. Like he's just like,
At the same time, also, this is like the first fit we ever see Flay have with him against him in any way. So in some ways, it comes across as a little sudden. Yes, he does have the emotional support of Kagali and others now, so he doesn't feel like he has to rely only on Flay. And you could say this is just him being a teenager and he can't deal with Flay's shit right now, doesn't even want to
yeah,
try.
like he's like what 15, 16, 7, like
Yeah. And like in the middle of the war, totally emotionally exhausted, etc. Uh, but even so, at least you feel kind of bad for Flay. Like he just sort of like broke up with her over something very sudden and minor. It feels, yeah, and I do think again this was partially influenced by the fact that she was a very unpopular character and people hated this character.
here's
Like
the thing. Like
we're
I
we're
originally hated
talking
her.
we're
Like I
talking level.
originally
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Like here's the thing. I was in the similar camp. Like I originally hated her. Like as a person, I dislike her, but what she represents and as a character, I think she's fucking great.
Oh yeah, and like we're talking levels of hatred on par with like the way people hate Nina from Code Geass. Uh which I think is somewhat unfair because I think Nina is a much more dislikable character than Flay. Uh but regardless, uh they break up. Kira ends. They the Archangel departs port. They go out into battle. They fight the Zaps forces once more, and this is like you can tell they're pushing towards the big final battle where everything's going to come to a head. And it's at this point Kira manages to get his first kill on like the
The Zala team, as it's called
on
now.
the Zala team as it's called, where he's able to kill Nicole, who is like sort of like the quiet guy of the Zala team,
Yeah, like yeah,
and
he's similar to Kira, right? Like he's kind of like a moderating factor in the team.
yeah, pretty much,
But
and
before that event happens, we do have the thing with Kigali and Afrin. You know that romantic getaway on the island where they try and kill
oh
each other.
yes, I forgot that happened there. Yes, oh right, so we're gonna have to discuss that for a second. Kagali decides to basically nominate herself as pilot of the secondary air
Jet,
fighter on the
yeah,
Archangel.
that Moo pilots. So
Yeah, and of course she screws up and ends up crashing at one point in battle. Um, and crashes on this island, and there's this episode devoted to this sort of weird star-crossed lovers on either side story where Kagali and Afrin meet on the island. I do find it
and
kind of fun.
Sparks start flying along with bullets.
Yeah, I do find it kind of funny that Kagali is was basically about to get shanked by Afrin, and he only saves her because she screams like crazy, and he realizes she's a girl.
Oh, hell Shavalik. He's like, yeah, I'm not gonna kill this. I fucking love their chat in the cave, or like how their fucking guns, like their pistols have bolts. Like I was saying to you earlier, right? Like I think that the ZAF put most of their military budget into fucking mobile suits.
Something like that.
Which considering the setting, considering like what they're up against, is probably a smart idea. But like their
Yeah,
conventional firearms need some fucking work. Like Jesus Christ.
maybe. But anyways, they decide. They have this whole thing where, of course, he got to dry off one's clothes. They get soaked. Yada yada yada. The usual type stuff. But one of the bits they talk about around the campfire is basically about that. Hey, I'm not going to go after you, but if you, what would you do if I went for that gun again? Well, unfortunately, then I'd have to kill you. And Kagali, in like sort of this moment where she's considering it as Athrun sleeps, and she herself is kind of shocked at how casual Athrun can be about this.
What are you gonna do? Kill me? Affirmative.
She's sort of considering going for the gun, and the lines are going through her head like, this guy, even if he's nice and he's kind of funny and he's like trying
Somewhat
to help
charming.
me, he works for the other side. He's going to be shooting. Not just that, he's the one who's been shooting at my ship, at my friends, this whole time. If I let him go, he's gonna like continue shooting at us. So she's briefly having this run through her head as she's considering looking at his gun as he sleeps. Evelyn sort of wakes up a little panicked. She decides to suddenly go for the gun, uh, and she apologizes to him to say, "Hey, I don't want to do this, but you're going to kill more of my friends, aren't you?" And Athrun basically says, "Then shoot me. Basically shoot me if you dare." And ultimately, she throws the gun away. She can't bring herself to do it. And both of them are ultimately allowed to go their separate ways, and they give each other their name and head off, which will have relevance later. So Kira kills Nicole, who was 15
Like
years
literally
old
cuts him in half with a sword.
and loved to play the piano. And Afrin is not happy about this.
Efren is very, very, very upset.
Yeah, it probably didn't help that Nicole was probably the closest person to him on the team, and probably
Yeah,
the one
because like
he trusted most.
Izak and fucking Diaka are kind of like snarky people. Like fucking Diaka snarks and Izak's like attack, 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 no 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 no. Like Izak's like a fucking chihuahua. He's like attack, 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 no no.
Yeah, pretty much. He is voiced by in the Japanese by like Domon Kashu's VA, which is very appropriate. And so Athrun is like, I will kill Kira. And he is just nuts. He's like, I'm
He
going
kills
to
Toph.
kill him. So Toll. Yeah, I know. He's so forgettable. Who cares what his name is?
I know. Basically, one of Kira's friends dies, right? And him and Kira basically, like, they just slug it out. And what I love about that scene, right, is that, like, there's so much passion and fucking raw emotion that they're just, like,
Oh yeah,
ripping the fuck each other apart, and it's great.
it's definitely one of the highlights of the show. And there's just a scene. Kara! And the VAs are screaming their lungs out. They are doing their best at this.
I love that scene. Like it's just raw passion, raw emotions. We're going to rip the fuck out of each other.
Slashing the fuck out of one another, killing each other, and ultimately he kills Athrun's mobile suit, latches onto Kira's. It's about to fire a giant cannon to blow him away, but it runs out of power. So Athrun types in the self-destruct code on his mobile suit, sets it to 10 seconds, blasts off in his jetpack. At 5 seconds, Kira realizes what's happening, and there's a gaping hole in the cockpit, like a slash from a beam saber through the cockpit. And he goes, "Oh shit!" And then the mobile suit blows up in this gigantic, like
Explosion.
200-meter wide explosion.
But Kira doesn't
And
die.
Catherine gets like
Akira,
fucked up in the blast.
and Atherin himself is injured by the shockwave and barely manages to get away, and the strike is left in total disrepair. The cockpit is a burnt out mess, but there's no body. There's no body of Kira. And you might think, oh, well, clearly he was vaporized. He died in the explosion. There was no way he could get away from that. It was a 200-meter wide explosion. There was a gaping hole in the cockpit, and all the leather on the
melted
on the seat is melted away. Like there's no way he survived it.
Yeah, because by the way, because fun fact, humans don't burn, we melt. So if that heat was enough to melt liver, yeah, like he like if he was in the blast race, he would have melted basically.
Yeah. So you might think Kira's dead, right? This is where we transition to a new main character. Maybe Atherin and Kagali become the two main characters, and we go from there, and we see about the issue of eternal vengeance and stuff like that. Except Kira survived. We aren't told how he survived. We are never told. We see a shot of his body apparently lying on the ground, barely worse for wear, in front of this reverend who is tending to this island, who apparently decides for some reason to magic this person up to the space colonies and to Lacus Klein. Because
it turns out they're fucking buddies.
Yeah, because that's clearly what you do when you have someone in serious condition, is you decide that the first thing to do is to magic them off to space.
Hey, Lacus, there's this injured kid on my fucking lawn. Isn't that fucking cool? Hey, you want to go take care of him? Sure thing. Go. Yeah, go.
Yeah,
Have
someone in critical condition go through the G-forces of entering space. Like, I don't care if you have mass drivers, that's still going to take some toll on your body.
Yeah. So basically...
Yeah,
yeah, go on.
No, go ahead. You said almost nothing, Stu.
Nothing. I was just going to make a dumb joke about, Jesus Kira, Jesus Yamato, because he rose back from the dead 3 days later, or something. At first, I literally thought that, like, maybe they had, like, resurrected him as a clone or something to do with, whatever.
No, listen, lad, like a single DNA strand. Like, listen, a single strand of his DNA survived, and he regrew like Cell from Dragon Ball Z. Like, he just reconstructed his body.
I mean, he gets power-ups like in Dragon Ball, so...
He's going to become a super coordinator. He's reached the level.
Yeah, there's even like a tie-in they ultimately did in like the Gundam Seed Astray manga, and even that doesn't explain like how he survived. It only explained that this character dumped him at the feet of that character, who then dumped him at the feet of Lacus Klein. And it's like there is no canonical explanation other than Kagali's wild speculation of maybe he got thrown from the mobile suit into the blast radius. There is no canonical explanation of how Kira survived. No one knows. It is never explained.
I don't even fucking Kira fucking knows. Like, he just wakes up chilling in the fucking plants on his fucking pimp on his pimp bed. at Lacus's client's house, who by the way is Afrin's fiance.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Lack Seagal Klein is the main moderate bit of the moderate faction in Zaft, whereas Patrick Zala is representative of the radical faction. So their arranged marriage, is very much like a bringing together the prominent families of Zaft, whatnot.
Yeah.
But
Like I was talking, I'm just imagining a scene like Afrin shows up with his fiance and it's like, "Oh, Kira, you're alive." He's like, "Yeah, I thought you were dead. So was I." And I'm like, "You will be now." Bang.
no, no, you have to quote Mortal Kombat movie at that point. Kira, you're alive. Too bad you will die. Uh,
Fatality. Finisher.
that's great. I've never seen that movie, but I just know that scene. It's perfect.
I grew up on like watching the Mortal Kombat movie videotape, like Mortal Kombat. Dun, 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 dun. Oh,
Anyways, we're not here for that. Um. So yeah, Kira wakes up miraculously on the space colonies. Meanwhile, Kagali finds an injured Atherin.
Efren. And this is
And
also another great scene, by the way. This is a
yeah,
great scene.
and this is like one of the contradictions of the show is like almost in the same episode you have something like so dumb. I've not seen this in like any other like anime really, where there's just like no attempted explanation of how this character survived.
He should be dead.
And then you have this wonderful scene between Kagali and Atherin where
Like, yeah,
uh,
Efren is just pouring his fucking heart out, and he's just like he didn't even know why he killed, or killed quote unquote Kira. Like, it was
well
just like he's just like running so much adrenaline and emotions that he just like went batshit.
Well, Atherin's perspective is he, after Nicole died, killing Kira became like his whole purpose in life at that point. That was his
Yep.
purpose, to take revenge. And after he's done it, he's sort of like almost catatonic and oddly receded. He doesn't. He has this like bitter smile on his face the whole time, where he's like, and when Kagali asks him, "Did he kill Kira?" He says, "I killed him," and he seems like oddly proud and happy in a way, like I did it, I finally did it. Uh, uh, and it's this mix of emotions where he feels like in a way he's accomplished his purpose, like he's finally done what he's supposed to do, yet lingering at the edge in his subconscious is this guilt uh, over over killing his best friend. And Kagal is able, basically, because this is like an anime, and she's like wildly pointing guns at him. The show has main characters like point guns at one another often for like emotionally stunning, emotionally important scenes, which is something you never do. Like anyone who knows anything about guns knows that. But at the same time, it works very well in the show. Not in real life. No.
Yeah,
Uh,
don't do that.
but well, and Kagali is really able to bring out this guilt out of Atherin, where he hates himself. On the one hand, he's oddly proud and resigned to his fate, and he's like, "Go on, kill. Uh, why am I still alive? Was my fate to die? Was my fate to live? Or was my fate to be killed by you?" Uh, and he goes like, but Kagali's able to draw that guilt out of him again. She like yells at him, "Why did you why did you have to kill him, and at worst at the hands of a best friend? And he like goes, I myself don't know, why did I do this? uh and it's really very nice scene about
Yeah,
tragedy
and he
for
talks about
tragedy of
like
others.
like he basically said like like I love the scene where he's like I told Kira over and over again to come with us. Like he was supposed to be he was one of us. You're supposed to like he was supposed to be with the Zaft and the plants. Like and you really empathize with Afrin's situation. Like you really like and he did. He told Kira time and time again, come with us. And like I said earlier, like it's not like Afrin couldn't arrange some sort of deal, like
Yeah,
some sort of deal.
the cap off to the scene is him going, he was my enemy uh, at, at, at that point. I had no choice but to shoot him, right? And Kagali like breaks down at him. You idiot! How the hell could you come to that conclusion? And they both basically start crying on one another. And that's is an issue that some people have with Gundam Seed. It's a show where a lot of people cry. There's a lot of melodrama and stuff like that. Again, I think for the most part, that type of stuff is justified in this show. I don't have any complaints with it, really, on that regard. I mean, do you buy a Gundam or a student?
Oh, sorry, I had to take a swing. What did you
It
say?
doesn't really bother me now. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but then again,
What did you say? Because I was saying I had to grab something quickly.
Oh,
uh,
I was just saying that uh, some people don't like Gundam Seed because there's a lot of melodrama and crying and stuff like that. I don't think it's used poorly, and it doesn't bother me in this show.
Um, I will tell you that sometimes, like, it does bother me a little bit at times.
Hmm.
Because the anime does feel a little bit boy bandish, a bit pop bandish at times. But
Yeah,
like, I would say like the scene with like Afrin, like I would say that like in the core key scenes, it's actually fairly good because like with Afrin, right, like they show so much conflicting emotion, so much like fucking grief and anger and raw passion.
yeah, absolutely.
Like it's great.
So,
Like that stuff is great. The other time is a bit for me.
so this is where the show really starts to derail for me. Some people prefer it, but for me, this is where the show really starts to derail. So you have Kira back up on the space colonies. The Archangel is finally making it to Alaska base, the main Earth Forces base, where all the main characters, all of Kira's friends, hope that they can finally get decommissioned. Apparently, Orb couldn't do that for them. They got to go to the Earth Forces base. At the same
What they couldn't see
time,
the fucking facts.
yeah. At the same time, Zaft is about to go through with a new operational offensive. Um, and while the current chairman, Patrick Zala, had told the Central Committee, the Supreme Council, that his plan was to invade Panama and take the last mass driver and means of the Earth forces to get into space offline. His real plan was to actually blew that out as a false plan, so that they
Yeah, like
concentrate forces
which is
there.
actually
Oh
which
yeah,
is
it's
actually
very
very
smart.
well. Because here's the
And,
thing, right? Like it serves for two purposes. A, it smokes out spies. Like because Sun Tzu talks about this in Art of War, right? Like there's several types of spies. And sometimes, and one of the ways you can actually use spies if you're having people spy on you is give them false information.
mhm.
You
Yeah,
know, if tactical fuckery.
yeah, and ultimately he does that and reveals to the whole troops right as they're about to go down, our real target is Alaska, the Earth Force's main base. Now, ultimately, unfortunately, this doesn't work out for them because hey, there's one spy they didn't figure about, Raul Cruz, the head of the Zala team, who happens to have his own self-interested motives for why he's doing it. So, unfortunately, the forces stage their own trap. They decide to blow up their own base and leave only token forces defending it, blowing up much of the Zaft army. In the middle of all this, though, um, they have. So apparently, the chairman, like Siegel Klein, the moderate, is somewhat annoyed that Patrick Zala isn't pursuing more peace negotiations, even though, hey, apparently the Earth forces aren't really negotiating with very good faith, anyways.
I mean, here's the thing: this war started with fucking nukes, so like you can't get any more bad
Yeah,
faith than that.
yeah, and and apparently he also went over their head, and apparently, I guess, by the technicality of their system, he's supposed to run these types of military operations by the Supreme Council and not keep them in the dark or lie to them. Although, considering the fact that even his secret version ended up getting leaked, seems pretty well justified. Um,
Yeah,
but
like, honestly, when it came to Patrick Zala, right, like he made a gamble, and it just happens that, like, you know, like basically it tips off his fucking paranoia because, like, hey, wait a minute, how did they know about that? We've got a spy.
yeah, and so eventually, so in the middle of all this, Lacus is tending to Kira. Kira hears about this. He knows his friends are probably at Alaska, so he naturally wants to go help. Lacus asks him, is he going to fight for the Earth Forces again? No. For the Zath Forces? No. Then for yourself? Yes, I'm
Yes.
going to fight for my. I'm going to fight for
Chad, yeah.
myself.
No, like, Kira's just like, Chad, yes.
And so he decides that. So rather than, I don't know, admittedly, they do explain this away by having a single line where they say, "Oh, there's no shuttle, anything currently going, or anything." So, in order to get him to Alaska in time, Lacus decides to gift Kira the one, perhaps the only mobile suit with atmospheric reentry capabilities, the top secret, state of the art Freedom Gundam. She decides to, and I don't mean gift as in this actually belongs to Lacus Klein or anything. I mean that this is a military secret, one of the most powerful bits of technology that they have. And and
And
she
arguably
decides,
predestined, yeah, and arguably
and,
predestined still.
yeah, and still is by the next show. And she decides to hand it over to a civilian who, as Patrick Zala points out, for all she know, could be a spy. And she just hands it over. And
Hey,
zero
kid,
attempt.
want to see my top secret military equipment? Fuck yeah!
You make it sound like she's an android. My top secret military equipment.
See what she did? They walked in, right? She gives him the Gundam, doesn't elaborate, leaves.
Yes, yes. And what makes it even more ridiculous is there is zero attempt at subterfuge here. She walks up in full view of the monitors and recording cameras with Kira as like, here's your Gundam, Kira. Want it?
Get in
Yeah?
the robot, Kira. Your friends need
Yeah.
you. Get in the robot. Go. Kick butt in your robot. Get in the robot.
Yeah. So Kira flies down to Earth. He he saves a bunch of lives by telling everyone that it's a suicide mission, and he
Oh, by the
informs
way,
both.
can we just say the Meteor theme is fucking great?
It is a good theme, yes.
Like it's just
And,
like dun 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 dun. It's like, yeah, boy, yeah, let's fucking go.
and it works. And he tells people on both sides, "Hey, get away!" This, uh,
Yeah, shit's about
uh,
to pop off. Like, run away. Both sides stop fighting, retreat because you're about to fucking die.
yeah, and he's able to save some lives. Probably Zach lives solely due to that.
Oh, by the way, we did forget that Diaka, one of the guys of the Zala team, is actually on the Archangel this time because he got captured after the
Yes, he
battle.
ends up getting captured. There's actually
Well,
this
well,
great.
well,
There's this great scene where he's just sort of taunting people in his very snarky way, and
Chad energy.
in particular he's snarking at this one teenage girl who's just crying all the time, and he's going, "Hey, what are you crying for all the time? Did your natural boyfriend get shot or something?" And of course, that was right on. And so, like, the moment he says that, she just pulls out a knife and starts trying to stab him, like
He's like, damn,
Higurashi
bitch, you're crazy.
style. Rah, rah.
And
People
he's
come
like,
in and
damn, bitch, you're
intervene.
crazy.
People,
Dude, I fucking like Diaka. He's just kind of like the snarky Chad mother. Like, he doesn't give a fuck.
people come in and intervene and try and stop her from doing that, but stop her from committing murder against a POW. But that's a
Then
fun
Flay
scene.
decides, like, I want to do a war crime.
Yeah, and then Morale is calmed down and says like, no, maybe not. But anywho, back to Lacus Klein. So she is just handed over.
Oh yeah, we should mention that like Luke
a top.
Crusade captures Flay.
Yeah, okay, yeah, she does capture. He does capture Flay, and she gets stuck with Wild the Crusade for almost the rest of the show.
Okay, back to Lacus
So
Klein though.
yeah, back to Lacus Klein. Lacus Klein has basically just committed high treason.
She should be shot
Or
on sight.
no, I mean she should be arrested. And
Arrested, then firing squad.
yeah, so for some reason, her father decides that what Lacus Klein did is a reasonable state of affairs. We really don't get to hear his opinion on why Lacus is doing this or why he should allowed. There's some vague talk about like they don't like Patrick Zala and they don't like the fact that he's building new nuclear powered Gundams and stuff like that.
Yeah, we
But
should mention that, like in the show, the Zaft organization, basically it's tack on a little bit, but basically like Earth is suffering from power outages because like Zaft disabled like disabled the nuclear reactors and shit, and
yeah,
like
and then they created in top secret a ability that cancels out their original canceller wave field that stops our nuclear power from working. More
yes.
magic science. It's whatever. Anywho, Lacus should be wanted for high treason at this point. Afrin comes back to the plants. Patrick Zala, after being a dick to his son and not letting him call him father, briefs him on the situation, and Afrin goes like, "What the fuck? Are you sure?" When Patrick Zala says, "Yeah, of course. Here's the recording tape." No one would dare to accuse her if the evidence wasn't lock proof.
Like literally,
Uh,
she literally there were soldiers that saw her there, and she's on camera. Like
so uh, he so Patrick gives Athlin a top secret answering directly only to himself mission where he is to recover or destroy the stolen Freedom Gundam at all costs. Before doing that, Athrun decides to track down Lacus Klein on his own initiative and is apparently easily able to do so. And Lacus, when he asks Lacus about what the hell is she doing, she basically goes, I haven't assisted any spy. All I've done is give Kira a new sword, because it is
Nani?
something Kira needs and would serve its purpose best in Kira's hand. And Athrun is, of course, understandably freaking out a little bit about, like, hey, what? Kira's alive? What? And he's breaking down about that. So he's not really thinking about the fact that you just gave a top secret mobile suit to a civilian on your own authority. And Lacus then in this, and you can tell the show thinks she is absolutely righteous in this moment. She starts talking to Athrun. Why do you fight for Zath? Is it for the medals you receive, your father's orders? As if Athrun was some shallow narcissist that
No.
was which is so far
Well,
off the
actually,
mark. It's not
if you like,
funny.
here's the thing. Like, Afro, I think, signed up because like his mother was on that fucking colony that got blown up,
Yeah.
and he wanted to he's trying to defend his fucking homeland by a bunch of psychopaths who are trying to nuke them.
Yes, and Lacus just continues to go there and just acts very self-righteous. And then the Secret Service people show up to take Lacus in. Athrun decides to defend Lacus, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of soldiers under, I guess you could say, the pay and loyalty of Siegel Klein show up and kill all the Secret Service dudes. So at this point, you have to go, okay, not only did Lacus personally commit high treason,
Her
but
father's actively destabilizing the Zaft government by having his own
yeah,
little fucking faction.
yeah, and
By the way, this
killing
is not a
service.
political faction. This is not just like a political faction where it's like, oh, they may disagree on politics. No, like an actual fucking sub faction in Zaft that are loyal to him. Yeah, that's not destabilizing or like affecting the war effort in any fucking way.
No, not not at all. No, and so his men decide to save Lacus, and so at that point, Patrick Zala's like, oh my gosh, I have a nascent would-be civil war in my country. I have to deal with this. Where are these spies coming from? Who are these people? I have to crack down. I have to deal with these people. And eventually Siegel Klein gets found and shot. But the whole time,
Completely
the show
understandable.
keeps portraying Siegel Klein as, oh, he's just the meek, reasonable, moderate, and Patrick Zala is such an evil dictator, and they will use this because it's ironic in a way. They will have Patrick Zala give out these lines, which are sort of these militarist cliches. They're like the cliches that you hear of oh, this is bad guy militarist who's trying to unify the people, and this is how he's manipulating people, ignoring the fact that these people are flat out treasonous against his government over the policy of not over a disagreement in war policy.
Yeah, and
Like,
also here's the thing, right? With Patrick Zala, you can see him get a bit more unstable as the war goes on. But it's stress. His son is on a grind set, and he lost his wife at Julius 7 too. Like he lost his wife at that nuke explosion. Like I totally think that Patrick Zala, like at the beginning, wasn't a bad guy, but definitely as he went further on, like I can definitely see, I can see the argument that he became more extreme as time went on, but he wasn't like that originally. Like I'm
You can
pretty
see the
sure,
decline in him. Yes.
yeah,
Uh,
like
but
like I understand why, say the Lacus faction would be a little hesitant, like would be a bit on the fence with Patrick, but it's like at the same time, it's like the dude's under so much fucking stress and shit like that, and all this shit's going on, and his wife's died, you know, his son's going on the grind set apparently, and now he's got this fucking brewing civil war, and like he has to just all this shit. Like, yeah, it's like but for the most
no,
part, he's totally justified.
no, he is not. He is 100% justified in all these actions, and the show continues to treat it as if this is
It's
evil
evil.
warmonger cracking down on the opposition.
No,
when
here's
in
the thing. Here's the thing.
reality,
This is shit that Machiavelli would recommend. Like, this is just
no,
prudent measures.
no. This isn't even prudent measures. This goes beyond prudent measures. This is like you have people committing open treason in your country. You don't allow
Undermining your
that to
authority.
continue.
Yeah,
Period.
undermining your like undermining your authority, selling military secrets.
Yeah, it's truly incredible. Truly. So,
I mean, it gets even
and
worse. Like, it gets even worse. We'll say like Afrin comes back. Oh, actually, we'll cover that scene later. But like, you know, like from Patrick's perspective, it's like, yeah, he's got to crack down on this shit like immediately.
yes. So Afrin ends up traveling to Earth. Um, the Archangel crew at this point have decided to hole up inside Orb because they have prior dealings with them, and because technically they disobeyed Earth Force's orders by evacuating early and not dying in the blast radius. So they sort of feel like, sometimes it's better to just leave and mutiny now rather than try and beg for forgiveness from these people that clearly don't give a crap about us. And
I mean,
yeah,
basically,
it's kind of hard to blame
they're
them.
basically kept there because they're problematic forces. I mean, this is what you do, right? It's like, oh, you know, have all the your problematic elements and a fucking suicide mission. Yeah, they'll solve it.
Yeah, so they
Practical and
decide.
pragmatic.
Yeah, they decide to defect to Orb. It's at this point that Zaft, though exhausted, is still able to take out the Earth Force's last mass driver.
At Panama.
So, in Panama, this is apparently the only method of getting to space in Gundam Seed. So, the Earth Forces immediately turn their attention towards Orb, which have the last mass driver on Earth not in Zaft hand. So they immediately start threatening Orb. Hey, you'd better play ball. You better. We have
You
a
know what
common
Orb should have done?
interest.
Yeah, you know what
We
Orb should
have.
have done?
This is like a common crusade against like the space peoples. All peoples of Earth should be united. Yada yada yada. And Orb says no, we're neutral. Agree with that. And so of course war erupts.
You
The
know
Earth
how Orb could
forces
have
start
solved this problem
invading.
immediately? Just destroy their mass driver. It's like, whoops, lol.
Well, that's what they do ultimately. So
Yeah, they could have done that before the battle. It's like,
that's
hey,
true. Yeah, you're right. They could have sent Kira off and then done. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
they're like,
really inexcusable.
yeah, sure. We're thinking, but the mass driver got sabotaged. Really weird.
Yeah,
Funny.
yeah, funny. Anywho, um, for some retarded reason, Orb is so committed to being neutral. They believe neutrality is like the ultimate virtue. They think that means that even after you've been attacked, you don't join the other side. Because being neutral means being on your own at all times. It doesn't mean uh, if you're attacked that you join with the other side that doesn't attack you. No, 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 no. You see, neutrality means that you never coordinate with anyone else ever under any circumstances. Neutrality means that you're all alone.
And here's the thing: it's
Right.
not like Zaf wasn't willing to fucking help them.
Oh yeah, they cover that Zaft is making overtures to Orb saying, "Hey, you're being attacked. We will gladly support you. We're not asking you to trade sovereignty or anything. Just let us support you, and we'll start landing our forces there." And they say, "Nope, not interested." Zaft's just like, "Okay, nothing we can do then." Uh it's shocking. It's like no neutral country in the history of ever has ever done
Here's the
this.
thing: they stopped
But
being neutral when they got attacked.
yeah, it's like when Greece was invaded by fascist Italy in World War II. Even though Greece modeled its own government off of fascist Italy even though they were ideologically very similar, that didn't make it so that Greece stayed neutral. They joined the Ally immediately. Like, and immediately started relying on British aid and all that. Like,
Yeah, fun fact. Did you know that actually a good chunk of the New Zealand army, along with the Maori battalion, were actually deployed in Greece to fight that shit?
I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, they used the Maori battalion to scare Germans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Well, cat
literally a story,
battalions.
right, of them doing the haka. So the haka's like the Maori war dance. I'll show it to you later if you haven't seen it.
Okay,
But they play that, and the Germans are like in this bunker, like they hear this, like we surrender. Yeah.
hmm. Yeah. Anyways, for that, I'll talk about that right now. So, Orb is the dumbest neutral nation in existence. Athrun, basically of his own accord, decides to briefly help them out and
So
fight
does Diaka.
alongside
He
Kira.
along
Well,
and Diaka.
Antiocha. Um, and he. But here's the bit. After the battle, he goes out, has a chat with Kira, and he makes zero attempt to convince Kira to hand over his mobile suit, the proper authorities. Zero attempt to convince him. And when Kira says, "Nope, not going to hand it over under to anyone," Athrun says, "Okay," and he has no problem with this. He keeps fighting alongside Kira and Orb. He doesn't report back to his
Father.
father about this. He doesn't attempt to, say, sabotage the freedom, which wouldn't be that hard to do. And he was also what Patrick ordered him to do if he couldn't capture it back. Like, he doesn't do any of these things. He instead decides to start palling around with Kira again because he feels best friends, feels bad about it, but he's his whole mission
Yeah,
he just sort of
it is,
forgets
but
about.
Diaka's there too. It's like the Zala team reborn, except with Kira. It's like, I get to hang out with my bros again.
And he there's no thought about his mission or anything like that. So ultimately, they all end up escaping to space because, or being dumb and refusing to take any allies, decides to is incapable of defending their territory entirely on their own.
Yeah,
They have
listen, yeah, they've got Kira, Afrin, and Diaka, and Mula Flaga, but they're only four dudes. They can't hold the entire front.
yeah, and so
Oh yeah,
Kira.
we get the revelation with Kigali and Kira.
Yeah, so Kira he tells the head of Orb tells Kira and everyone else to escape into space on the mass driver, and then they're going to blow up the mass driver. And he also reveals out of nowhere that Kira and Kagali are actually brother and sister, twins. You're like, what? They don't even look similar. There was no reason to suspect this
There's
ever.
identical twins. There's fraternal twins. But yeah, we find out they're twins because he says like, "Oh, but you're not leaving me alone. You will be with your brother," and shows her a picture. And you notice that the woman in the picture
Ah.
does not look like fucking Kira's mother that we've been introduced to. Which you're like, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be another plot.
Yeah.
Anywho, they go into space. Athrun is like Athrun decides, well, okay, I have to talk to my father about everything that's going on, but I don't trust him anymore. So I can't let him have the experimental Justice Gundam that he gifted me. So you guys are going to keep it. Kira, Remnants of Orb, whatever. You keep my Gundam. I am going to take a
Go in a
shuttle
shuttle.
directly to Zaft with like no explanation of what the fuck happened.
It's an by the way, it's an Earth Federation shuttle, and his dad's like, "Where the fuck is the justice? Where the fuck is the freedom? Where have you been? And where's this? Why's this music playing in the fucking background?" Dun,
And
dun, dun.
and rather than attempting to explain his father's like obvious questions and report to his superior, Athrun immediately starts lecturing him about the nature of the wars. Like, what are you trying to do with this war? And Patrick Zala's like, what the hell are you talking about? You had a job to do, and now you're starting to lecture me about this stuff. You sound like that secessionist Lacus Klein. And it's at this point, Athrun gives out a line about, do you really think that meeting force with force will put an end to this war?
Yes.
And it's at this point that Patrick cries out, yes, and all of a sudden he realizes it'll end the moment every last natural is exterminated. That's when the war will end. It's like, what? And this is totally out of nowhere. He just says it. Other
You
than
know
him,
what? You know what my fanon is, right? Is that like he feels so betrayed that his own son is betraying him. Like he's just like, fuck it.
he's like he's just going to make his son hate him because he hates his son in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, listen. You give your son a nice giant robot, right? You know, do this mission. He's like, okay, father. He comes back fucking lecturing you. No giant robot, and like, dude, Patrick as a dad, like as a father, he's like, what the? Oh, where the fuck did I
Where
go
did I go
wrong?
wrong? Where did I go?
Did I not beat him enough?
Yes. And he says, if you refuse to answer, I shall have you arrested as a traitor. It's like, yeah, rightfully so. So, okay, and Athrun ends up getting taken away as a traitor. Um,
And this is where like you can totally see like Patrick starting to decline as well because like listen, he has to arrest his own son as a fucking traitor.
yeah, and this is like the screwed up thing again about the show, and this is why I have to dock so many points from it. It's like, other than randomly spouting out genocidal beliefs, which I will point out are insane because naturals are the vast majority of all humans, and coordinators cannot survive without naturals to procreate with. Uh,
Also, are you really gonna try and kill 20 billion people in a fucking war? Like, Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
yeah, nutty. Absolutely nutty. And this is like out of
I
nowhere.
don't even think you can kill that many people in an actual like I mean you probably could, but like yeah, like the sheer scale of death and destruction you need to do to kill that many people is like I don't even want to fucking picture it.
Yeah, yeah. And so he just is nutty about. But other than that, which it feels like an out of the blue like way to paint him as evil. Like, oh, any warmonger is just like secretly Mr. Schmittler in hiding. And but everything he's done outside of this, literally, the entire case for Patrick being evil at this point is an insane offhand comment. Everything else he has done at this point has been completely justified. Everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, Afrin gets taken in. Afrin at this point is starting to have a little bit of a suicide complex. He keeps like charging at people, trying to die in battle almost out of like misplaced guilt. I think for trying to kill Kira.
Yeah,
And
he also does try to blow the Justice up at one point. So
yeah,
for a minute.
he ends up getting saved by the Klein faction, who were going to break him out anyways, but his
Yeah, and
record.
apparently, like the guy basically says, like, "Oh yeah, you hit one of my soldiers." Like, even like that's what's insidious about the Klein faction is that you don't know who's on fucking like
Whose
who's on fuck.
side?
Yeah, like that's what insidious about. Is like even the fucking it's down to even the fucking grunt soldiers as well.
Oh yeah, it is like this is the type of thing where in reality, and the show's not thinking about this, but in reality, the level of this could not be coordinated and could not exist if Siegel Klein was not planning at some point to coup the government or have the ability to coup the government as a last resort measure. Like
And you
Siegel
definitely get
Klein,
you get the fucking impression that that was like he wasn't gonna do that, but that was like an option on the table if worst came to worst. Like that was an idea that guy was fucking considering.
yeah, and it's like that's nuts. And Patrick Zala is totally in his rights to resolve that issue and to deal with that. Like no leader would put up with that anywhere. But anywho, Athrun ultimately escapes. You have a couple more battles.
Oh, by the way, let's talk
Um,
about another bullshit thing. You know our favorite little tiger? Turns out he's alive.
oh yeah, Andrew Waldfeld. I've seen it. I've seen a. I think this is like the perfect encapsulation of the way Fukuda does a lot of writing. Is there's this one interview a while back I read about it where they said like they were trying to decide who was going to be on the crew with like all the orb remnants, and they realized they didn't have a lot of an adult present, like adult cool characters, and they decided, oh yeah, let's bring back Walfeld. Never mind the fact that his mobile suit exploded around him while he was in the
Yeah, and
middle of.
he died hugging his fucking wife. Like, you know, they basically blow up together. Nah, he's just lost an arm and like he lost an eye. That's basically it.
Yeah, it has a limp. It's kind of ridiculous. And it's just, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool to bring this character back? Yeah, but just because he's cool doesn't mean that you can ignore what you
He's supposed to be
wrote.
dead.
Yeah, he's supposed to be dead. And on top of that, he doesn't even do anything like in the rest of Seed. He'll do a couple things in the sequel, but he does absolutely nothing
Yeah, like he's
in the
just
rest of the
standing
show.
there being cool. Hello there, youngster. Yep, I'm back. And Chad.
Yeah,
Like
and he does
he's
nothing.
just there. He's just there to remind people how much of a Chad he is.
And it makes you wonder why on they wrote this. Why? You could have created a new character. Why would you do this? Anyways, uh, so he comes back, but then and this is the hard bit about Seed. Like every time it's like ungodly, terribly written, ungodly, not thinking things through or anything. You get back to something interesting. And in this case, we get introduced to Raul Cruz. Now, Raul Cruz we haven't been talking too much with so far. Raul Cruz was the head of the Zala team.
Yeah,
He
he's like a Black Ops commander basically.
and he was sort of the quiet guy, the Shaw clone, and he seemed fine enough, honorable enough in some ways, but he always had this nihilistic edge to him. Like there was one line in
Yeah, it gets
particular.
better.
There was one line in particular where Athrun is talking about, well, I have to go save Lacus, and Wow goes, oh, you have to come home crying with her corpse in hand. Athrun goes like, what? Nothing. So but even so, he's quite a capable commander. But you see, during the show,
Hints.
hey,
Little hints.
he seems to be handing over disks of information to the Earth forces. Hey, when he breaks into the Earth forces headquarters in Alaska, he realizes that the whole thing is set to self-destruct, and he notifies no one. He doesn't tell any of the Zat forces.
Which is
Why would
really
he do
interesting, and you also
that?
notice that every now and then he's taking the strange like medication as well.
So he, uh, he and Kira and Mulaflaga, all quite coincidentally, end up
End up at
crashing
this old colony.
at this old facility, and it turns out this is the facility where Kira was born. Kira was not like born from a womb. He was born in an artificial womb, which allowed them to genetically modify him almost perfectly because the female body isn't interfering with the course of development at all. And
And Kira is the ultimate coordinator, the
yeah,
crystallization of humanity's dreams and greed. And
yeah.
maybe they're
So,
onto something.
one thing which I did not understand is why was Arthurun, whatever how he pronounce his name, also able to have
Efren.
um, why
Efren.
Atherin, why was he able to have those seed moments when he gets a power up or
Here's the
something?
fucking thing, Kigali has those too, as
And
well.
see Destiny, yeah. It's never really explained what it is. You'd think it would be related to being coordinators, but it's not even related to being that. So who the hell knows what it is?
I see.
Because Kakali is canonically not a coordinator.
Yeah, she's not been like. Here's the thing, like she did not get genetically fucked with.
Yeah. Kira did, though, majorly. And a
And
lot of
you know,
people.
and you definitely get like you know at this point, like obviously when it comes to coordinators, like you do get the impression that Kira is like among coordinators is incredibly talented at mobile suit combat. Like you know, like you have like Izak and Diaka or like fucking Afrin who are kind of like bell curves, right? You know, they're kind of like above average. Like you know, they're above like the average coordinator. But like definitely with Kira, like you kept like from the beginning of the show, like you do know that as far as coordinators goes, he's definitely like top. Like he's definitely far more talented than say the average coordinator. But here's the thing about this revelation being like the ultimate coordinator, like that. Like, yeah, it does explain a few things, like how him and Kigali are related, and like you know a little bit about Kira's family life. But for the most part, it doesn't amount to jack shit. Like, how does this actually affect? It doesn't really affect anything.
No, it really doesn't, other than highlighting Raul de Crusade's own philosophy. Now, Raul de Crusade was apparently also an illegal clone, and just to be like super coincidental, he turned out to be an illegal clone of Mulaflaga's father. And Mulaflaga and Raul de Crusade have been like rivals against one another throughout the whole war. Turns out
Yeah,
they're technically related.
yeah, because we should go in that Mula Flaga I think belonged to like a wealthy family who helped funded the shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
So
only
another
revealed in
interesting
this
coincidence there,
episode.
like Mula Flaga's fucking father funded this facility that Kira was born. So it's a very interesting, like a lot of coincidences.
Coincidence on top of coincidence on top of coincidence. Yes. And
Almost like it's
wow.
fatal. So it's almost like fatal something. Like holy shit! Like there's so much like if you were to make like a conspiracy board, right? Like you'd have like Kira with Mula Flaga, like so many fucking strings and just
Yeah.
like
Couldn't be lazy writing.
Yeah, totally couldn't be lazy writing, totally at all. But yeah, like basically this revelation comes up, and it doesn't really mean anything. Like aside from like a manga where we find out that Kira has like a brother or something like that, but we're not going to talk about that. But
Yeah.
like this doesn't really change anything. Like Kira's still a talented coordinator. Kira is like this doesn't like that like you'd think that Kira would be a bit more affected by like everything that he knew was a bit of a lie. Like his family is not his actual family. Like you don't like you'd think that he would like, oh, what was my actual father and actual mother doing? Like why did they do this? Like you'd think that maybe he'd like to look more into his background and past, but nah, he ignores it.
I mean, to be fair, he never seems to care much about his family. Like he doesn't even talk to them at all on the on the ship, and then we never see them again. I don't think we ever see them again in Sea Destiny or
We
anything.
no, we see his quote unquote mother in Sea Destiny, which I think is like his auntie or aunt or something. Like we see her pop up every now and then at the beginning, but yeah, for the most part, like pretty distant family relations. But you'd think that finding this out, he'd want to know a little bit more about his origins.
Yeah, he's sort of not as interested. But Rao starts speechifying at them, and the VA. Some people like the English VA for this, and he actually puts in a really fairly good
Yeah,
performance.
I
I
would
really
say the
like.
English VA does a great job. Like he like because in the dub, right, like this guy's pretty admirable, like pretty admirable guy. Like he's a little bit sus, right, but he's one of those people where it's like, yeah, he's fairly amicable, right, but like just his voice becoming more unstable, and like the guy does a good job of voice acting like the insanity that's underneath.
Oh, and the
Like his
Japanese VA does a great job too. He actually got a Tomokazu Seki. He actually got a VA award for this for like the year best like
nice.
VA. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he is just going nuts on this. He's saying, like this is the problem with humanity in his view, that they endlessly try to compete, endlessly try to one up one another, and endlessly mistrust one another. And so at the end, in their endless struggle to outcompete one another and to absolute which eventually metastasizes into absolute distrust of one another and a war of all against all. From his perspective, this can only logically end in the absolute extinction of the human race. Uh,
And
and he thinks
considering
that's what
what
should
happened,
happen.
yeah,
He thinks
and
that is
consider
what should happen,
yeah.
and he is going to help events along towards that end. And
Yeah, because guess
everything he
what?
has
He's
been
found.
doing
Yeah, yeah.
has been
He's
pushing
found.
towards that.
Yeah, and guess what? The second he gets Flay, he's like, "Oh, I've got a new toy to play with." But here's the thing: considering events of the show and what happens, like in Gundam Seed Destiny, that's not an unlogical conclusion to take. Like literally, the war is getting to the point where it's reaching total war, and this conflict's been going on for like almost a year, right? Like, and here's the thing: Total War has no rules. Total
Yeah,
War is the guy who survives.
yeah, and that's the main issue, and this is the one legitimate point that Lacus and her faction have, is they're very concerned about this. They say, are we going to live in a world where we have a complete eye for an eye and a complete tooth for a tooth, and as a result end up destroying one
Because
another?
here's the thing about like Zaft, right? Is that they are like here's the thing: Earth Federation, all these terrorists, right? They basically use a weapon of last resort for first strike. They nuke a colony, and like basically they've already escalated things to total war, almost
Well,
total war
to
at
to
that
be
point.
fair to them, I believe they deny that Julius 7 was their work. I mean, all the evidence would probably point to someone under them, but the top brass claims that it wasn't them.
Okay, but basically, like this war started because a fucking nuke went off. Like that's a weapon you use, weapon of last resort, and that's the type of weapons that are deployed in a total war situation. And as the show, like yeah, like basically this conflict is heading to a total war situation. It was slowly building up before, but then Alaska and shit kicks off, and yeah, it's getting to total war. And you don't want total war because, as I said, Total War has no rules. It only has the person who survives.
Yeah, and we see this continue to escalate as Rao escapes, proclaiming that in the entire universe, he alone has the right to judge humanity. Wonderful line.
Yes.
He, as he escapes, uh, the war begins to escalate further. Patrick Zawa revealed that he has created a new doomsday superweapon, which is
the obliterate the obliterate natural Zenator. Like it's something that like fucking Heinz Doofenshmirtz would invent.
he calls it Genesis, and it's basically a giant neutron laser that can
He's gonna melt the
not.
polar ice caps. Bye bye polar bears.
Yeah, at first he uses it against the Earth forces military. So, and this is the other thing Rao does. The Earth forces couldn't use nuclear weapons because of the neutron jammers that were gifted off to uh, to Zaft, and Zaft spread these everywhere. Well, Rao leaks via Flay by handing her over as a prisoner transfer to the Earth forces all the data on neutron jammers so that they'll
The
know.
freedom and the justice shit too. He
So
hands him over the whole shebang.
that way they can start lobbing nukes at the space colonies again, which they immediately begin to do. And
Shocker.
yeah, big shock. And it's at this point Patrick says, "Okay, we're bringing out our space laser of doom. We're going to destroy their colony." And it's like, okay. And it's like, all
No,
right,
if I remember correctly, they're gonna target the moon base. And
they're going to
like,
target the
yeah.
moon base. And then it's like, oh, okay. If they don't persist after that, if they don't relent after that, yeah, we're just going to blow up the whole Western Hemisphere.
Based.
And some people start going, what? What? Have you lost your marbles, dude?
Yes.
He is very much lost. And
Look,
so
look. Here's the thing, right? Like, listen, when an entire fleet of people with fucking nukes show up at your doorstep, I'm like, yeah. He's like, and by the way, once we get to see Destiny, this is a recurring theme that's gonna happen.
What is?
Earth Federation showing up with fucking mobile suits armed with nukes.
Yeah, and just nuking. It's like their first response to anything. It's like, oh, oh, the space colonies have been taxing us too much today. Time to genocide them again. It's genocide o'clock.
We'll get them this time. We'll get them this time.
And you have to feel sorry for the space colonies. It's like they're really almost entirely innocent in all this. They're just trying
here's
to.
Zaft is the like aside from a few outliers, right? Like Zaft is like arguably the underdog and the hero of the story. In Seed and in Seed Destiny.
They just want to be left alone. They so want to be left alone. They exiled themselves to space. And they still can't be left alone. They still keep trying to genocide them.
With
It's
nukes, by the way.
insane. With nukes. With nukes.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah, basically, without the nukes, the Federation would not be able to fight against Zaft on an equal footing because the coordinators are just so superior.
Yeah, and at this point, the Earth forces are very depleted. They just don't have. And they have no way to, with all the mass drivers blown up, they have no way to reinforce their fleet. So this is like a last-ditch effort to win the war by the Earth forces. So they do all this. They try. and it's at this point like the three ships alliance of like the Orb remnants plus Lacus. Uh, they're trying to like at all costs interfere in this and stop Genesis from firing again at
Yeah,
all
and
costs.
I think Diaka sums it up best. It's like, okay, so they want us to stop the nukes and Genesis from launching off. Talk about fucking talk about fucking by the wire, man. Like Diaka's like, fuck me, I signed up for this. Fuck.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of responsibilities there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no, I remember correctly. He's like, wait, they want us to stop Genesis and the nukes. There's kind of a tall order.
the entire last two episodes, these are incredibly well directed episodes, and there's this
Oh, they're
constant
fucking
ticking
great. This is
time
a good
bomb.
final battle shit.
Probably maybe G Gundam accepted and by Nature Shaw's counterattack, the best finale in Gundam to this point. This tremendous final battle. You've got the music blaring in the background. You've got the constant ticking time clock. You've got Patrick Zala starting to speechify about we have to fire. We have to annihilate them before they annihilate us. And meanwhile, you have Raug speechifying also in the background, going, "This is the logical conclusion. This is what the people knew when they came to this point." Uh, uh, uh,
And
and
they
he's
hated him because he was right.
and he's going at it. Kira's like, how long do you want to continue on telling yourself someday, eventually, things will change? How long have you labored with that sweet poison ringing in your ears? Like, pure. It's very,
Nihilism.
very. It's very well written dialogue. You can tell whoever was writing Rouse dialogue really related to this position and was writing from the
Yes.
heart. But anywho, Kira basically refutes his position by saying, "Hey, I don't care whatever the hell you say. There's people in the world I still care about. That's more important. I don't care about your philosophical mumbo jumbo." Ends up killing him. They're able to just barely manage to stop Genesis from firing. There's this great scene where one of the other soldiers is like, "Sure, Chairman, like you're gonna blow up the whole Western Hemisphere. We've had the other forces are defeated. We've had enough sacrifices for one day." Patrick Zala turns around and shoots this soldier in the chest. Everyone goes like, and everyone on the CIC goes, it just gasps and goes, "What the fuck is going on?" Uh, and then he starts setting up Genesis to fire, and he goes, and another soldier goes, "Sir, our own men are in the firing line. They're all fighting to grasp victory. I'm sure they're all prepared." And it's at this point the injured the soldier he shot, who's not quite dead, shoots Patrick. Goes. At this point, Athrun and Kagali come in, and they were going to storm the place, but everyone just like peacefully clears out because they're done with all this. They're done with working for this genocidal leader who's now dead anyways. And Patrick, with his last breath, he like he sees Athrun there. "Fire, Genesis, make the future ours." It's like, gosh, what a crazy man.
Oh yeah, should we talk about the Blue Cosmos guy and also Mula Flaga's like epic moment?
See, I didn't even talk about Azrael because he's not important. Like
Yeah,
he's
he's
one
just a
dimension.
flop.
He's one dimensional. I hate coordinators. There's
Because
no
they bullied me as a kid.
yeah or something. and he has some view,
with me.
and he makes like one mention of like, hey, they're the superior race. They'll eventually conquer us if we, the underdogs, don't take care of them. I was just like, okay, but that's like the grand total of his motivation. And
Yeah,
other than that,
he's kind of shit. However, we get out of that. We get a really cool moment from Mulaflaga, which I love, which is completely destroyed in Seed Destiny for reasons we won't talk about now.
yeah, Mulaflaka has a great heroic sacrifice
Oh no,
where
that
a
mimic is
giant
coming back. Come on.
uh,
Come
laser
on.
a giant laser is about to destroy the Archangel, and he throws the Strike Gundam in front of it, and his whole mobile suit explodes, and he dies.
And his last words were, "And don't you see, I make the impossible possible."
Boom.
Boom. And I saw that scene. I was like, "Yeah, that's fucking cool." And then in Seed Destiny, they completely
No,
fucking
no,
shit on
no!
it.
Stop, stop, stop! We're not talking about it. Not talking about it. Not talking about it.
Okay, but in isolation, this was a very cool scene.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's a very cool scene. And yeah, uh, so it ends basically like that, with Rao is ultimately killed.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Flay dies
at,
and she becomes like an angel. They give Kira Yamato, like more
yeah,
holy power.
yeah. Kira tries to defend Flay in battle, and her shuttle ends up getting shot down by Rao. She, as a ghost, basically apologizes to Kira, saying that she'd been so short-sighted, but that she's towards everything and everyone, but that she's free now, and that she loves Kira, and that she'll always be with him, and gives Kira the newfound resolve to go and fight Rao and ultimately defeat him.
Do you,
And
want, do you know what's fucking ironic is that like Flay in a way actually ended the war by her
in a way,
actions.
in a way, uh, and then Afrin is able to blow up Genesis by telling his own Justice Gundam to self-destruct. He's down to like a minute left, so he goes like, "Oh, I just have to commit suicide. I have to do this myself." Um, because of, and Kagali intervenes and says like, "No, you absolute idiot," and tells him it's more of a fight to keep living, and she like basically pulls him out of his Gundam and gets him out of the blast radius before this dumb motherfucker can try and kill himself again. And that's pretty much the end.
Yeah,
Genesis gets
they just see Kira like floating up in space, like just like enjoying the view.
Genesis gets blown up before they can return. But before it can fire again, the Earth forces and Zaft are both exhausted at this point, and they sue for peace. Status quo antebellum. And that's the ending. That's it.
So, how
There
would you
is
rate it?
A 6 to 5, a 5 to 6 out of 10.
5. See, as much I there is so much, like in terms of
Potential.
there's potential there, but there's and there's actually realized potential in a lot of it, because like uh, the ending episodes 2 and 8, perfectly done, perfectly paced. I cannot praise them high enough, and I think that's a lot of the reason a lot of people will attempt to say that, hey, Seed Destiny is the bad one and Seed was like the good one, is because Seed is actually somewhat reasonable at, like, it will just throw you through plot events so fast that it's kind of hoping that you don't notice the plot holes, and sometimes it's successful. Um, but at the end of the day, there's so many issues with its logic, or issues with the way it tries to portray Lacus as people as being they're traitorous, and it has almost a very naive view where like every warmonger is Mr. Schmittler, and it's your duty to greater humanity to immediately defect against them, which is like that's a horrible message. That's an evil message right there. In general, the show doesn't seem to have that much of a concept of like natural loyalty to one's own faction, which I say is definitely a deficit in the show itself. Uh, but at the same time, it does portray well how these escalating uh, resentments do build, and it has like the ultimate logical cap off to all of it, and it portrays that part quite well. And
Yeah, like
while
I
the
think it does
side
a good
characters
job.
are like nothing, the main characters, I'd say, especially people like Athrun, are actually rather compelling,
Yeah,
and there's a
very
lot of good
good.
moments with them. So it's a weird show where you have like 9 out of 10 moments followed by 2 out of 10 moments, and that's what makes it kind of hard to rate. But ultimately, I got to give it a 5.
Yeah, it's just that basically every faction, or rather both factions, turn out to be kind of evil.
Yeah.
So there's, I guess, and the faction which was good, I guess, Orb, well, uh, as you said, like it, they had to
They're
like
retards.
it's like there wasn't any point to their existence other than be neutral.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're perfect neutrality. We neutral is good. Neutral is good, and it is like an incredibly childish view, unironically, and like it while it's trying to lambast people who try and like pull people into war, and like that's fine. Its version of like total absolute neutrality is naive in itself. Like
Like
it's
it's a miracle
insane.
that nation hadn't been conquered yet.
Yes, yes, indeed.
It's a fucking like. Listen, if there is a god, then listen,
He is
Orb's existence just
smiling
proves that
upon
there
them.
is a god because it's a fucking miracle they haven't been conquered
To
outright.
be fair, I think that basically they were one of the few nations on Earth who used coordinators. Um,
Yes, they are like basically the only country on Earth that tolerates coordinators, and they which probably gives them an edge up in certain amounts of tech. And they do have like high, they have like mobile suits out of the gate and running. Uh,
Yeah, like apparently
Basically
the
at the
stuff
same
they
time
gave for
the
the
Earth
Earth
Forces
forces were like the
does.
prototype shit.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like if they had betrayed their neutrality, there wasn't anything else to their identity to
Yeah,
speak
and
of.
that's the other thing is they openly betray their neutrality, and the show just sort of hand waves it as well. It was ministers under Mr. Arthur's command, and he had no knowledge. It was like, even if that's the case, those people should be hanged, and we really don't get to see any like actual punitive measure he takes against the people responsible. And it's really just a wild. The show doesn't put as much emphasis on that as it should, to be honest.
So in terms of the complaints which Seed usually gets, I've seen stuff like, oh, there are too many Gundams. It's pretty much a Gundam fashion show. Um,
Yeah, and there's so many complaints like that, which are really so insular, and basically have nothing to do with like the actual quality of the show, and have to do with personal preference of past Gundam shows, where uh previous, like in the Universal Century, there was just like one Gundam, whereas in like Seed, and this was also true in Wing as well.
And Double
That
O.
and G, but we're not talking about Double O because that didn't exist at this point. Every important mobile suit is a Gundam. So ironic, I have to agree with them somewhat, where that can create an issue where, and I'd say gets worse as it goes along. Where if you're not fighting a Gundam, it's like it's not even a threat at all. The show doesn't entirely feel like way at the start, but it increasingly feels that way towards the end. So I can definitely see that on a certain storytelling level, that definitely hurts the show. But it's not like an all encompassing, like terrible, insurmountable uh flaw or anything.
Um, in terms of recommendations, one of the shows which I've seen recommended for this, if you like this, is usually Code Geass. Which of the
Yes,
which of the two would you say is better and why?
Code Geass is far better. Code Geass is far
Less
better.
plot holes, characters are a bit more interesting.
More
Um,
going on with a lot more going on with the main rival. You can tell there was a lot of inspiration from this into Code Geass.
oh fuck
Uh,
yes.
the rivalry, Princess Euphemia was definitely based off of Blackus Klein. Uh, but Code Geass does something a lot more interesting by making it so that the two childhood friends that are fighting on one another, they have personal stakes for why they're fighting, and the main character like is like the actual terrorist leader of the other faction,
Yes.
and has all this other stuff going on. And even the side, this is another thing, like the side characters are actually well characterized in Code Geass, and you actually kind of grow to care about them, whereas they're just like fucking nobodies in Gundam Seed. So like I could go on in like a zillion different ways in which Code Geass is just superior to this show.
Yeah.
Or just in terms of like direction, where like Gundam Seed is one of those shows we haven't talked about too much, but it can really drag. The first,
Yes.
the starting episodes are like garbage. They do nothing to draw you in. Things just sort of happen, and you don't care about any of these people. Code Geass has like one of the all-time best opening anime episodes ever. Sets up everything perfectly,
I order
draws
you
you
to
in,
kill yourself.
ha- has a has a compelling cliffhanger to end on, as you see that your main character is going to be this this kind of crazy guy with these strong motivations.
Yeah,
It, it,
anti-hero shit.
it's really good stuff. Gundam Seed only reaches heights like that at like in a few specific moments.
Yeah,
Um,
and like quite a few of them mention Afrin. Like, honestly, I would have preferred if Afrin was the main fucking character, like
yeah,
the main character.
yeah, and that's one of the I'd say advantages of Seed Destiny is like it ends up being like where there is no one central character, but Afrin is one of the three main central characters in that, and gets more emphasis in that than he does in Seed.
Yeah. I like. I mean, for example, when it comes to the stuff about Lacus Clyde or whatever her name is, her faction, like I can understand why like they would think that oh, what they are doing is correct because because things are escalating and it will lead to uh, total destruction or whatever. But like there's it's so one sided. It's yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, they don't wait until after Patrick Zala has become has started
It's
doing
gone
like
crazy.
yeah, they do it ahead of time, which makes it clear that they're just sort of treasonous, and they're just sort of deciding for themselves that
It's
they
like
think they're above the current ruling mechanism, and they think they deserve to rule, not
yeah,
Patrick. Which is
yeah,
it's the
basically,
definition of treason.
yeah, it's like earlier you were talking about how Lacus just arbitrarily was able to predict that Kira wouldn't betray, wouldn't just basically just take the Gundam and go and fight with.
I I mean, it was fair for her to
Assume
believe
that.
that because she like knows Kira and she knows his personality and she's met him once before. But it's like, does she know him well enough to justify such a radical action? No,
Like,
she
she
doesn't.
literally gifted him a prototype, like, arguably one of the strongest mechs in the series. Even in Seed Destiny, it's one of the stronger mechs in the fucking universe currently. Like, she gifts him with an incredibly powerful mech. It's not even hers, it's the fucking state. It's like me going to a military base, like an American military base, and some dude gifts me, like, the newest prototype tank. And I just drive off with it.
Newest prototype jet fighter
And
is
like
the
there isn't even a moment of doubt that like in her that
Yeah, I'm totally not going to use this. Thank you for the fucking prototype stealth fighter, U.S.
um,
government. Thank you.
yeah. So who do you think is best girl in this series? Gundam.
Kigali.
Who?
yeah,
Kagami. Yeah.
Kigali. Probably. Oh, I have to admit, I have a soft spot for Play. Like through all this, like she is the character that looks after Kira through all this. She's like slightly manipulative and clingy, but not too much. So it's like,
She,
I can kind of appreciate it.
I guess it's the more quote unquote a realistic female characterization.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, very realistic.
Um, yeah. I'm also going to give this a 6 or a 5. There are moments when it goes up to a 7, but overall, no. Um,
Like,
yeah.
honestly, Gundam Seed is like one of those shows. It's similar to Scryad, right? Like, it's a draft or two away from being a masterpiece, essentially. Like
Yeah,
this,
but
like,
Scryad
but
was
Scryad
better
is actually
though.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like with Gundam Seed, right? Is like this does like this needs enough of like this needs a bit of polish, like because that's what bothers me of the show, right? Is that you see all these good ideas, you see all this good shit happening, like a lot of like these really good scenes, and but it's just dragged down by all this other fucking bullshit.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of it was them being tied down by like running out of time and not getting drafts in on time, or just the production not going well, because they had 4 recap episodes in all of this, 2 of
I
which
also heard
were
that
back to back.
apparently, yeah, I also heard that the director, like the lead writer, was also clashing with actors. Like there was also some like studio drama going on as well. I actually heard that.
That's
I don't.
I see. I've mostly heard that entirely from Western fans who consider Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny to be the incarnation of evil and Satan's black spot upon the Gundam franchise, and will not shut up about that. So I basically completely discount those claims.
Oh,
They could be
here's the thing.
right,
I don't like.
but I completely discount them.
I take it with a pinch of salt, right? But I heard that was a thing, but I have no confirmation.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you don't know the Japanese language fluently, it's hard to go searching for this type of stuff. Anything that's like available in English is like almost third or fourth hand knowledge, really.
Do you guys feel like the opinion which people have on Seed has changed at all over the years? Or
I
what?
feel like it's softened somewhat. It almost has to. By the way, we should
Gundam,
mention
but yeah. By the way, Gundam
the
Seed does
reason
get decent model kit attention, so it's not
the
like it doesn't
the
have its fans.
yeah, this is one of the most popular shows, and it is more popular than the originals in Japan and in China, arguably. And the other thing is, this show was so controversial, specifically its sequel, Seed Destiny, which will be have its own flaws that are much in line with the original Seed.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be a fun
It
discussion.
was so controversial. It it is the reason that the 4chan board of M exists, because there was too much spurging out about it on A, so M was created
Just for Gundam Seed.
just for Gundam Seed Destiny.
Okay. I guess.
So this is it's in a way this is like an incredibly historically monumental anime
Yes.
as far as all this stuff goes. Um, but I'd say opinions on it, both pro and against, have softened over time. To answer your question, student, I feel like there are a lot of people who still just dislike it, just have no interest for it, and whereas there are some people who quietly like it and will defend it. But to a certain degree, all these opinions are just in the rear view mirror now. It's been 20 years now. People are like moving on, and it's sort of like a big controversial event. This is an odd comparison. It's almost like the JFK assassination, where it's like that was who really killed him, whatever, was a huge talking point and debate for a long time, up until the 90s and 2000s. Nowadays, JFK and the America he represents is just like so far afield that even if nothing has been decided about, even if a plurality, a fair amount of Americans still don't believe the official story and still are skeptical of things, it's so far in the rearview mirror that people just don't care about it and they've moved on.
Have your own opinions? Like, were you ever like with the majority on this, and then it changed, or was it all this?
Yes, I was actually one of the people. I didn't see Gundam Seed for some time, and I was one of those people who would post along about Gundam Seed being terrible, just off of the cherry picked plot points that people would bring up. And then I actually
Yeah,
sat down and watched it,
and
and
you also caused Wacky Modder to go on a schizo rant, so it was funny too.
not talking about. But yeah, and then I actually sat down and watched it and was like, hey, this isn't all bad, and I was kind of surprised. I mean, as far as Gundam shows go, it's not the worst.
It's no victory Gundam, okay?
It's not the worst. It's not the best. It could have been amongst the best, but it wasn't. Um, it's simply there, and its popularity will no doubt continue. Like it helps that these are some of the most popular mecha designs in Gundam currently. And there's still talks about a sequel to Sea Destiny, and maybe
Oh no.
that. Yeah, they still want to create a movie sequel. Though it's been stuck in production development hell since forever. They made one of the bands that's involved with all the Seed stuff made like some
Team
comment
Revolution.
about, yeah, I think it was them, about how something is still coming down the pipeline, and I think like someone in Bandai vaguely confirmed that, but that was like nearly 2 years ago, and there's still been nothing
Well,
since
like
then.
in their defense, COVID has been a thing, and like a lot of shit's been happening of late. So
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of minor characters that we didn't talk about, like Natalie and
They're not important.
they're not important exactly.
Yeah, we didn't talk about them because they're not important. Like, I talked about Moralia insofar as she has that wonderful moment where she's like, "Oh, did your boyfriend die or something?" And then she psycho murder tries to kill him, which is
Dude,
it's
I
a
like here's the thing.
hilarious scene.
They did my boy Diaka dirty in Gundam Seed Disney. He doesn't even show up much. I'm like, damn, you could have had him. We'll get into it, but dude, that's the one issue I fucking have. I dislike about Gundam Seed is like literally after the orb battle, right? Like Diaka, Afrin, and Kira are like chilling, and there's not much dialogue between them. Like, yeah, they have like an understanding that they're on the same side, but like they act like they've been friends. Like there's like I understand like why they'd throw that throw all the animosity away, but like I don't see them like having a discussion with each other, being like, yeah, so I'm the guy who's been shooting at you. I'm the guy that has shot at you, or you shooting at me. Like there's never that discussion with the arc or
No,
shit like that.
no, and in general, the show, and this is another one of those things that I really have to dock at points for. Unless it's like the main characters or the main themes of the show, the show can seem like totally uninterested or totally unable to write these characters, these minor characters in like more mild situations. It doesn't know how to deal with that.
Yeah,
And
because like 'cause after like they get up to space, right? Like Kira and fucking Diaka kind of acting like teammates and bros, and I'm like, I would have liked to see this relationship a bit more developed. Like, did they have like a chat? Like did they have a chat that we didn't see, or like a talk, or like reached an understanding? You know, I would have loved to see that.
I don't know. It's like that's not the type of thing Gundam Seed ever shows.
I know,
Ever.
and I wish they did because, like, what I liked about like the Zala team and shit like this, how they played off each other, right? Like, you know, Diak is being snarky, Izak's being a bit snarky, you know, Nicole's trying to be like, you know, be a moderating factor. Afrin's like, you know, grind setting up in the corner. Like, they kind of play off each other, and they could have had that, you know, with Diak, Afrin, and Kira, but no, they don't. Like, they just blow past half that shit, and it bothers the fuck out of me.
I mean, it doesn't bother me just because I expect it. But it's the
So
same
Yeah,
with
but
Kira and
it
his
annoys me because it
friends
could have been
and all
cool.
of it.
so we are reaching the 3 hour mark. I think we have discussed
Yes.
yeah, everything.